Yes, we've got everybody but Bob. Okay. Great. Well, welcome everybody. We've got lots of people in attendance again, which is always great to see. So tonight we'll start with our public comments, and we'll go into board comments and superintendent comments. We'll look over the consent agenda, and then we've got quite a bit of new business. We have our monthly reports from Nikki. We also have Communicable disease plan presentation from Dr. Morlock, update on school reopening, update on the construction bond, finalizing board goals, and then we've got a couple of board resolutions authorizing deposits and designating auditors and counsel. So lots of big stuff going on tonight. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with public comments, and I'm just going to kind of give everybody a little bit of a reminder. The Newberg School Board invites and encourages citizen attendance and involvement. The board encourages citizens to share their ideas, opinions, raise questions, concerns, or compliments. And thank you to everybody who has submitted a request to speak tonight, and for those who've sent in comments and those who are here just to see what's going on tonight. So in order to conduct a timely meeting, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and requests to speak during the meeting are not accepted. When called, please state your name, your relationship to the district, place of residence, and the subject that you'll be addressing. The board may choose not to address your request if your topic is outside the scope of board governance, and we ask that you remember that Oregon law prohibits us from discussing specific employees or their job performances. And I also ask that your comments focus on board actions and refrain from personal attacks on board members. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here tonight. As a board, the comments we hear help guide us in our decisions and help educate us as leaders in this community. So let's get started. So we're going to start with Abigail, and then after Abigail, we'll move on to Melody. So Greg will bump you over. There she is.
Hi.
Hi, Abby. Thanks for coming. Go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Hello, my name is Abby Brown. I live on Antonio Way in Newberg. I've attended Newberg schools since kindergarten, Crater, CV, and the high school. First of all, thank you to the board for passing the anti-racism resolution. My mom told me you were working on goals today, so I have 3 ideas to share with you. These suggestions aren't meant to be a criticism of the great teachers I've had. They are places where there's room for growth. Number 1 is to figure out why students of color are not in advanced and AP classes and encourage students of color to enroll in those classes. There aren't very many advanced classes, but the ones I'm in are mostly white students. It was 10 white students and 1 person of color. Number 2, we should learn about more Black history and the history of people of color, and learn about famous Black people and people of color because we don't really learn about it. In 8th grade, we studied the African slave trade, and I don't think we read anything written by a Black author. And number 3, I think we should have real consequences when students use racial or ethnic slurs. I have heard white boys my age use the N-word and not get in any sort of trouble for it, and I think they should. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Abby. Well done. Ron, since Bob's not here, would you mind being our timekeeper?
Okay, but I have to make little signs, right?
Yeah, okay. So let's wait. Melody is next, and after Melody, we're going to have Stephanie.
You can go ahead. I'll just make my signs.
Maybe you can wait a second. It's okay.
Probably use fingers too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll make signs. It's fine. Go ahead. She can start. It'll take me, she has 3 minutes. It'll take me 2 minutes to make signs.
Okay, so. That sounds good. Okay, Melody, whenever you're ready.
Hello, school board directors. I'm Melody. I go to Mabel Rush, and I'm going to talk about racism. Me and my mom have been talking about racism lately, and I realized I didn't know about this because I didn't learn this from school. I think we should learn this at school because this is a very, very important topic for kids my age to learn. And maybe, I don't know, since I'm in 3rd grade, we learn it when we're in 4th, 5th, or 6th, but I think that we should learn it at 3rd grade, because then you get a good understanding when you're older. And I think that learning about history, I don't want it to be one focused. And when we learn about history, it's mostly about white history. So when we think of history, we think of George Washington, the founding fathers. We don't think about Harriet Tubman or all of these amazing people. So much of history has been written by Black people, and we don't really get to learn a lot of that from school. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Melody.
I didn't get to use my sign. I'll be ready for the
No,
next
you
one.
did such a good job. You didn't even need the signs. Thank you. Okay, next we have Stephanie, and after Stephanie, we will have Terry.
I don't know if Stephanie knows she's muted or.
Sometimes it takes a second. Let's see. Oh,
I think this is the wrong Stephanie.
oh,
I just wanted to watch.
oh, sorry. Okay. It's Stephanie with a Y. If that helps.
That was Stephanie Nally. So you just wanted your written comments into the record? Is that what you meant? It was the correct Stephanie in the order. Okay, who's next? Terry, did you say?
Oh, sorry. Now I'm talking muted. Sorry about the confusion, Stephanie. Next is Terry, and after Terry, we'll have Erica. Thank you, Greg.
I just did do the wrong one. I apologize. Hang on a minute.
We do have Stephanie. Okay.
Everybody who jumps, there's so many people adding it, jumps very quickly.
All right, so we'll get Stephanie in here, then Terry.
No, sorry. Now it's Terry that I'm trying to get there.
Okay. Sorry, Terry, and then Stephanie?
Sorry, I'm looking at my order. No,
That's okay.
Terry and then Erica, I believe.
What about Stephanie
Stephanie
Nally?
just said she didn't want to give a speaker. That was Stephanie Nally that I put there, but she said she didn't want to comment. She just wanted her written comment to be in there.
Now I'm confused because in the Q&A she said I'd like to make the comment.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even see the Q&A yet.
It's okay, it's okay.
Okay, I will put Stephanie on after Terry then.
Perfect, okay. Sorry about that confusion. Go ahead, Terry, whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm Terry McGilligan, the principal of Mountain View. I followed the statements made by the board in discussing and then passing the anti-racist resolution. I've also followed the public comments. I understand this is bringing difficult conversations to our community. I do not come here to point fingers. I come here to offer opinions. In recent weeks, I've had parents contact me to ask, do we really have issues with racism in my building? My simple answer is yes. I ask that you close your eyes and imagine the following. Picture a group of students in a locker bay chanting, build that wall, build that wall. And the one student they are taunting is pleading with her eyes for the teacher on supervision to come to her rescue, but she does not. Now picture opening your locker and a note has been dropped in with the N-word, and we don't want or need you here in our town. Keep your eyes closed. Now picture that you're in the cafeteria line at Joe and Austin. It's the fall of 2016. A Caucasian boy cuts in front of 3 Latino boys and yells at the top of his lungs, I'm not going to stand here in line behind you, and you need to go back to your own country. As the principal, I removed the boys and took them to my office. Both had tears running down their face. I turned to the Caucasian student to ask what he had said, and he repeated the words. At that point, the Hispanic student said, Miss Mack, can I ask them some question? And I nodded. Have I done something to you? No. There was a short pause. Has someone that looks like me done something to you? This time there was a longer pause and then a flood of tears. Yeah, will call me trash. With maturity beyond his years, the 5th grade boy answered, "Ah, I would be hurt if someone said bad about me." I was dumbfounded. Here was a 5th grade boy that had more compassion and understanding than so many adults around us. His experience of being discriminated against allowed him to see the signs in someone else. What did your personal lens see? Do we have racism? My father, a colonel in the Air Force who commanded a flight crew with a black boom operator in Alabama in the early 1960s, once told me that the lens in which one views the world needs much more correction than one would personally be willing to admit. We now have an anti-racist resolution written and passed, yet words written on a piece of paper are easy to write and easy to post. It's how we collaborate and move forward will be the real test. Each of you board members were voted to fill a position in a particular zone, but you are here to represent every student that enters every school building in our district. Therefore, I challenge you to do the following. Walk with each other to introduce yourselves and build relationships with students and families in every corner of our school district of every color and every economic standing. Reach out and listen. And second, set your own personal lane aside. If we are going to change the interaction at the grassroots level, we must see the experience through our students' eyes. Isn't that why all of us are here? My suggestion, stand on the shoulders of my 5th grade Hispanic student, lean in with compassion, hold off making judgments, and strive to find common ground, even in adversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Mhm.
Okay, Greg, is Stephanie next?
That's who I just tried to put on, Stephanie Nally.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
Hi,
can you
Stephanie.
hear me?
Sorry for the
Okay, good.
Go
Hi,
ahead
my
when
name
you're
is,
ready.
okay, all right, thanks. My name is Stephanie Nally. I live in Newberg and I am a 2nd grade teacher at Joanne Austin. I want to thank you for continuing to be present and volunteering your time to important discussions on how we can further improve our district for the benefit of our students. I would like to address the recent article on the graphic from July 20th where Dave Brown provided some statements regarding his no vote. Here he expressed some opinions about hiring staff of color and his disagreement with this needing to be a priority. I would like to share some research that explains why focusing on hiring more diverse staff is necessary. When there is a goal to diversify our staff, it does not mean we are hiring people just because of their color. It does not mean we are going to hire teachers who are less qualified either, but it does mean that we're going to make it a point, we're going to make it a mission to recruit, find, hire, and keep our staff of color in our district. It means we're making these actions for our students of color. There's an abundance of research that shows that students of color do better if they have at least one teacher of the same race. There have been studies to prove that students of color will have less expulsions when they have more diverse staff. There are also studies that show that having teachers of color can increase expectations of students of color, therefore allowing them to be more successful. According to the Center for Education Data and Research, some researchers argue that minority teachers are more likely to have high expectations for minority students. This can have important impacts on student outcomes because minority students, especially Black students, appear to be more sensitive to teacher expectations than middle-class white students. And also because of the self-fulfilling prophecy phenomenon in which negative stereotypes appear to perpetuate poor performance of minority students. As a Hispanic teacher myself, growing up in a predominantly white town, I never had the opportunity as a young child to see myself in a professional position. I felt the need to lose my culture, my identity, and even my language in order to fit in. Now as an adult, I realize how challenging it was to lose a part of myself, and I want better for our students. I believe our district needs to put a plan in place to ensure that we're going to diversify our staff for the benefit of all of our students, but especially our minority population. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, now we have Erica, and after Erica will be Amy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Excellent.
go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. Hi, I'm Erica Syrie. I am a mother of Grayson Trollstrup, who is a student at Mountain View Middle School, and we're residents of Newberg. My concerns this evening are surrounding the safety of returning to school for our students, teachers, and community members. My employer, since coronavirus has started, has been super flexible and generous with our family's priorities and my son's education. But I'm here representing those who are unable to have that liberty and maybe need a few extra clarity on making a decision for their family. Upon reviewing the fall reopening plans, there's a few questions and details that I feel like we need a little bit more elaboration on. These details are important for families to make the decision that's the best and safest choice for their situation. A few of the questions that I have, if a family chooses distance learning, will there be a cap on the amount of students allowed for this option? If families are choosing the hybrid model, I saw in the sorry, if the families choose the hybrid model, will temperatures be taken in conjunction with visual screenings? I think that that wording was a little bit unclear in the document of just exactly what goes into that visual screening. And I think further elaboration on that process might make people feel a bit more at ease. And then reading the guidelines provided by the state in the form, it sounded like the air filtration upgrades were recommended. And I think just a little more insight as to what types of systems and filtration each of the schools have would be really helpful. So that way each school and staff, students know kind of what they're going into. And then on the mask adherence, I was just more curious on what type of documentation is needed for the mask exemptions. And then any students that do have a mask exemptions, what type of notification will parents receive if someone in their students cohort is not adopting to that? I feel like that's really important just for them to be able to understand who is and isn't. It's not that it's necessarily a good or bad thing, but I think everyone's comfort level is a little bit different. And then most importantly, how will our teachers be supported to ensure that there's proper compliance of social distancing and mask wearing being taken seriously by students? And then if my understanding is correct, a COVID-19 test is not required for symptomatic children in order to return back to school. If a child is showing symptoms and their parent refuses to test, how will that be handled and how will the community be notified? I really appreciate your time listening to my concerns. I know this hasn't been easy on anybody, and there's not a great option that works for everybody. I really hope we're able to find a solution that works to minimize the risk to our community at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. If you're able, I would suggest staying on for the rest of the meeting. I think some of your questions will be addressed.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so next we have Amy, and after Amy, we will have Janae.
Okay, thank you. My name is Amy Stevens, and I am a parent of children within Newberg School District and a resident for 20 years, as well as an educator. So to our Newberg School Board, thank you for your concern for our community as demonstrated in your leadership. This is to share my deep appreciation for the passage of the resolution committed to be an anti-racist school district. I am a white woman parenting children within the Newberg schools, 2 of whom are Black and 2 of whom are white, as well as being a fellow educator. This ordinance is truly what I expect of this beautiful community and district, which I'm so glad to see the momentous growth it is making. Racism is ingrained in our society and forever a part of us, requiring our ongoing work, continued struggle, and as this resolution states, our shared mission. For clarity, from my perspective as a parent of both Black and white children, I share with you my children suffer in monumental and daily ongoing ways as a result of racism right here in our town, all of my children. This is hurting all of us and placing undue burdens, which, as we address, can hurt us a little less. We fight racism in our individual means, in the partnerships of advocacy provided by fellow students, in the remarkable teaching I see in the educators who stand in the gap, and community members that commit to equity within the paths open to them. Some see the disparities and suffering made evident through racism, while it remains largely invisible to others. We require a structural framework to have targeted growth and accurate awareness along with a shared purpose or mission. This resolution is such a strong step in developing the provision of the shared mission. How supportive of students, teachers, and community this is, ensuring we are most productive in this work rather than it being individual means. My hope is our board will empower our schools to continue their course of data-driven work as demonstrated through Educational Excellence Partnership and ongoing equity audits. My hope is our educational community to have a purposeful, collective efficacy as change agents and stronger equitable outcomes for students, reflecting on the small successes along the way. And my hope too is to know how I can continue to support in however I can. I appreciate, as stated by Dr. Bettina Love, the struggle for educational freedom does not somehow vanish when you apply theory, but your barriers are no longer hiding in plain sight. Now you have the language, understanding, and hopefully co-conspirators, not only to fight, but also to demand what is needed to thrive. Thank you all.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, so now we have Janae, and after Janae will be Stephanie Finley, hopefully. Stephanie's.
Kim, I was assuming that Janae is going on your account. There we go.
Okay. Ask if they can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, she's frozen.
You jinxed it.
My name is John, and I noticed that he was specifically yelling at the women, and there was a lot of yelling, and I was confused why. Makes sense to me why when you're having a peaceful meeting, why yelling should be happening, because yelling at people in general is not a very nice thing to do. And I feel like, especially towards people of color and women, these are the people who have been given a harder time in the past. And if you're just yelling at them, that's not okay and is wrong. Very much just like how when people use their power to do things they want or to their advantage, that's not okay when you feel like you know more about something, and to use that and make someone who you don't think knows as much about it to get what you want. I don't feel like people who are going to act like this should be in charge of mine and my peers' educations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Janae. Hey, would you mind forwarding your comments to Greg? Because we could only kind of cut in and out, and it would be great to have your statement in our minutes. If that's possible, that would be awesome. Okay, next up, Stephanie Finley, and after Stephanie, we'll have Andrew.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Stephanie Finley, and I am the parent of 2 young children enrolled at Mabel Rush Elementary School. I want to thank this board for recently passing an anti-racism resolution. I believe that words matter and that our children are listening very closely. I also believe that words are meaningless if they are not matched with action. My specific request tonight is that this board implement policies and procedures that match the words of your resolution. I'm asking that the Newberg Public School District immediately audit the reading materials in the elementary schools' libraries and classrooms for equitable representation of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, and then make a specific actionable plan to curate diverse and inclusive literature collections that are accessible to our young learners. I'm asking that every elementary student that walks the halls can easily see people that look like them in their books and their curriculum, and that they can read and learn in their native languages. Can I count on you, the school board, to say unequivocally with words, deeds, and policies that Black Lives Matter? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. All right, after Stephanie, we have Andrew, and then we will have Sarah after Andrew.
Drew, you will need to accept the, there should be a dialog box saying promoting to a panelist or something like that to be able to enter in. You're changing a category.
Are you there?
There we go. Welcome. Go ahead.
Popped up, Greg. Hey, my name is Drew Gallagher. I am the Vice President of the Newberg Education Association, and I have two hopefully brief comments to make as an elected member of NEA leadership. One about something that's happened recently, and another one about something that's we're going to be working through going forward. First, regarding the board's recent adoption of an anti-racism resolution, the Newberg Education Association stands in solidarity with those who seek to shine a light on our country's long history of oppression when it comes to minorities and underserved communities. We understand that as members of an educational institution, it is in our community's interest to not only make known the systemic injustices done to these communities through teaching, but to also put forth the requisite effort in order to stem the continuing insouciant treatment regarding students of color in our schools with regard to their unique experiences, cultures, and histories. We recognize that the composition of our district teaching staff does not always accurately reflect that of our community. And because of this, it's incumbent upon us as professional educators to be acutely aware of this incongruence and keep thoughts of equity at the forefront of our teaching practices. Similarly to the district's resolution, we too are in agreement with the idea of implementing a culturally responsive and respectful curriculum, as well as teaching practices in order to, again, try and stem the tide of casual neglect and or indifference to the struggles of communities of color within our community and American society. And finally, I'd like to end this comment by saying that Black Lives Matter now and today and every day. And my second comment has to do with moving forward. I'm sorry to switch gears so quickly, but I know I have time constraints. The Newberg Education Association values first and foremost the lives and well-being of our students, educators, and those in our community. Following that, we value the education and learning of our students in order to help them become productive and valued members of the very community that we serve. Because of this, we believe that face-to-face learning, whether in the form of a hybrid learning situation or a complete return to school, should only occur when there is significant scientific consensus that placing hundreds of human beings under one roof, even with supposed social distancing and masks, is sustainably safe for all parties involved in a school setting, as well as all parties who are even tangentially related to that school setting, such as family members of students and family members of educators as well. At this point, there exists a tremendous amount of factors that we know we cannot control, as well as unintended consequences of opening school that we cannot possibly fathom. And to try and list them here would be too large of an endeavor. Because of this, NEA supports the idea to begin the school year with distance learning for students and having teachers work from home or school, as in empty classrooms, to digitally provide students with the highest possible quality of education and the safest possible education. Distance learning is definitely not the ideal educational situation for most of our students, nor is it for our educators. This is not something that the teachers of Newberg take lightly, as we all desperately want to get back into our classrooms and we want to get back to some sort of sense of normalcy with our students. We're working with them in our classrooms the way that we've come to love for years, and for many teachers in this community, decades. NEA leadership will continue proactively collaborating with district leadership in order to facilitate how online learning will transpire for students and staff, and how it will look, and we will look forward to problem solving the myriad issues that will most assuredly rise. I have 2 more sentences, sorry. What we truly look forward to, though, is returning to in-person learning, first and foremost, more than anything. But the lives and well-being of our students, educators, and their families should now and forever always come first. Thank you very much for the extra minute.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Drew, for joining us tonight. Okay, our last public comment for this evening will be Sarah. Hi, Sarah, we see you, but you're still muted.
Can you hear me?
Perfect. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sarah Greider, and I'm a Newberg School District parent and former school district employee. I live at 104 East Columbia Drive. On Saturday, September 11th, my family and I stayed out day at the kitchen table. I had a cup of coffee. My husband was out working in the yard, and my 2 college-age sons were grazing in the kitchen, and my elementary age daughter was watching cartoons. It was kind of a rare moment, thanks to COVID, that our entire family was home. I flipped open my laptop and opened my social media to see a friend's post. Please log on to the school board meeting if you're able. You have to see what's happening. In my heart, I had hoped, given the recent anti-racism resolution being passed, that the board was making headway into their goals and setting a course ahead for Newberg schools. Instead, I witnessed 2 very disgruntled male board members attempt to derail the business of the day and the entire anti-racist resolution. A few minutes into watching, I realized my husband was now listening and was stopping in his tracks periodically to make concerned faces and raise his hands up to the sky in disbelief. My 2 sons had settled into a landing pattern of pacing around the kitchen table, sitting for brief moments, and then going back to pacing the house. Once the meeting was over, I sat there, stunned at what had just taken place. I knew things were bad, just not that bad. What came next absolutely broke my heart. My sons, one who had left the house in such upset and the other who had retreated to his room, came in and started telling me stories about some of the folks they had seen on the screen during the school board meeting. They started to tell stories of teachers who proselytized in health class, who made racist remarks routinely, and about friends who knew about all the racist staff members but were too afraid to tell. My sons were so upset, they thought I knew. How could I have not known? Mom, you are usually so on top of this stuff. We didn't know we had to tell you. They've asked that I not be too specific, so I just offer this as a general example of why we need anti-racism built into our work at the Newberg School District. Because as parents, staff, and the public, we often overlook some of the most harmful behaviors and assume the kids will tell us. Unfortunately, we know they won't. We must work to create a proactive approach to confronting bias and barriers in our district and constructively weeding them out. We can't wait for it to be somebody else's job or for the funding to come in. As we move forward with a very challenging school year, it is going to take us all to listen, ask the tough questions, and create spaces for our kids to be safe with the least amount of barriers. Thank you for being willing to do the hard work.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to everybody who joined us this evening and for everybody who made public comments. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to board comments. Do any board members have comments this evening? Oh, Rebecca, you're still muted. There you go, go ahead.
This past July, we in the Newberg School District have lost 2 young men. July 5th, Hayden Fredrickson, 16-year-old student at Newberg High School, and on July 20th, Wesley Warmuth, 18, a student at Newberg High School and Catalyst. I'm wondering if we could have a moment of silence, thinking of their lives and also their families and the students who shared their lives.
Yeah, I think so. Let's go ahead and do that. And then you bring us out of it when you feel like it's time, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
We want to think of their families and again, the students and the faculty who knew them. Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you, Rebecca. Are there any other board comments?
Yeah, this is Dave. I do.
Go ahead, Dave.
You know, I appreciate people calling in and you know, I know some of you guys who do call in, and Sarah, speaking specifically to you, you know, we always got along really good at the high school, and, you know, tough conversations, you know, around a table like that, been there, done that, and sorry your kids had a tough day. I think in context as a parent, sometimes you need to know everything that goes on rather than just catching part of a school board meeting. I think sometimes when we have discussions at the school board level, there might have been a reason behind tough words that were being spoken that night. And I think that those get lost in the shuffle for a lot of you guys out there. You don't hear comments that we make to each other on the board. And I would love to say those right now, but it's inappropriate. So I'm not going to do that. It's frustrating to sit back and hear, you know, people are having tough times. I think in this world today, I have, again, I've said this every single time, fought against racism every single time. But we have this discussion about there that when we have these call-in on school board meetings, I want everybody to know, and I want all the rest of the school board members to know, that in the last 3.5 weeks, the amount of people I've had call that don't agree with the resolution, they don't agree that all white people are racist. They don't agree with some of this stuff. They do agree completely that we want to make our schools awesome for every single child. And I appreciate all the people that have, in droves, and I mean lots, and I want all the school board members to hear this. And I'm not saying this to protect me at all. Brandy, I'm talking to you. Ron, Rebecca, Inez, Brian, Bob. This is coming from people all over our community that do not agree with your vote. They're just not calling in tonight. But they do agree, just like what we just heard, that we do need to protect every kid. But there's a bigger story here than just one side on this, how we go about doing this. And so, again, you don't hear everything we talk about, and you don't understand maybe out there why there was a loud discussion there. And we don't tell you everything we talk about on the board. We need to have more discussions and more tough discussions. My first year on this board, we haven't had any of those. And all of a sudden, when we come across a tough topic, people get their feelings hurt. I'm talking about the board members right now. And you know it's true because it's popped up. The board members know this. And, you know, again, there are a lot of people in this community that that would like to see changes, but not the way that our resolution passed that. And so we have to be really careful as a board that we are speaking to our entire community. But I haven't talked to anybody on either side of this issue that does not want racism to go away. They don't want kids to be treated poorly in any way, shape, or form. They want every kid to be given every opportunity. And so I'm just hoping that as a community that we can come together and have these discussions and just listen. and try to understand the other side. And I would challenge you, Brandy, to that more than anything, because you and I are probably just polar opposites on this. And I think we need to come to more of an agreement on how we're going to discuss this stuff. As our board chair and as a school board member, we're both elected to this board. And if we can't do it, then who can? Thank you.
All right, any other board comments?
I do.
Go ahead, Inez.
I just want to thank everybody that has called in support of the resolution and brought up their concerns. I'm glad that we're 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and this still continues to come up because it's still important, because it does exist in our systemic, in our education system. So thank you for everybody that calls. Keep calling. Invite your friends to call. I don't mind sitting in these meetings to listen to the different stories that you all bring, but keep calling.
Okay, Ron or Brian, any comments? No? Oh, you're muted, Ron.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I've been thinking about something. I guess I want to say something about I've kind of referred to this before, that in my view, this board has the potential to be the best board for the district in the 8.5 years I've been on the board, because we have so many strong members with different views. I'm not saying the individual members of this board are any better than previous boards, because all the ones I've served with are people I've been admired for their character and intelligence and commitment. But what we do have is difference of opinion. Each of us is here because we won an election. We're the ones that the people have chosen for this task. And so this is the team that has to get things done together. I am not in favor of purging the board of people who disagree. I'm not even in favor of purging the board of people who can't always moderate their language and tone, because I think I am capable of immoderate language and tone myself. I know it would be more comfortable and more predictable if we were unanimous in favor of the resolution, or any other decision we have to make, including about how we do school in the fall, etc. But even though I supported the resolution and still do, I am against cleansing the board of people who dissented about that. It's possible, obviously, to have toxic disagreement. A board that bickers and yells at each other is not serving the people. But it's also possible to have toxic unanimity. And actually, anytime a group fails to have dissenters, that group is handicapped and loses some of its ability to recognize its own errors and correct its own behaviors. So what I'm hoping we can do this year, it's big work, it's part of just a little extra thing on our agenda, is learn how to use our different perspectives for the benefit of the district. That means we have to be able to trust each other. That means we have to be able to be predictable in our behaviors. I think, Dave, when you knew that you had an interview, you should have let us know so that we didn't find out about it by reading it in the paper. That would be an example of the kinds of things that would help us know to trust each other. I don't have any problem with you giving the interview. I don't blame you for everything in an interview, because the journalist himself also has to go through his filters. But the fact that there was an interview and it was probably going to make the paper should have told us. Our official meetings are not well designed for the kind of rich listening we need to do. So I hope we will create opportunities, not only for us to listen to each other, but also keep having opportunities for us to listen to people in the public, like we've had a lot of input lately. And I think that's been great. So I guess that's my summation. I'd like to keep everybody who's on the board right now, having been elected, on this board, and I'd like us to do the hard work. It's going to be uncomfortable to be able to work together as a team despite our disagreements.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, with that, let's move on to superintendent comments.
Thank you, Chair Penner. I'm going to keep this very short because you'll be hearing a lot from me tonight. So I just want to thank, first of all public for logging in and watching and paying attention. For the folks who gave comment, I know that that's sometimes not the most comfortable thing to do. And for our board staying engaged in all of this. This is hard work, as Ron said, and it's not always going to be comfortable, and we have a fairly bumpy ride coming ahead of us. So I just want to thank everyone for staying engaged pre-thanking you for showing some grace as things unfold over the next several months for us. So that's all I have for you.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go on to the consent agenda. There are not any donations to call out, which again is not super uncommon for summertime, but I would entertain a motion.
I'll move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, Brian seconded. So with a motion and a second, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, Rebecca, I can't see your hand quite well. It was raised. Okay, great. Thank you. Passes unanimously. Okay, next up is reports and presentations. We've got our monthly financial report from Nikki.
There we go. Got myself unmuted here. For this, the report I submitted is kind of a preliminary June 30 report. We still have items that will trickle in throughout July and August that will be booking back. But I've included everything in July that we received that I was aware of, and things that would impact our SSF and our due back to the state. So looking at the notes, you can see right now the fund balance looks like about 8.8 million, but we're going to owe about 550,000 back when they reconcile next May. For the miscellaneous, there's a few things that came through that we might still be paying out. We're out of 1920, so that's just kind of an estimate. ServPro was a company that came in to help with a water leak in one of our buildings, and their bill came in quite a bit later, and it was about 58,000. So this is kind of an estimate of unknown things. And workers' comp reconciliation, we always have an adjustment based on volunteers and other things that get rolled into the last statement. So we haven't received that yet. So I just left a little buffer in case we had a few more things trickle in. So in looking at this and adjusting out the contingency that we have built in, it's like we have about 4.7 million over and beyond the contingency. So going into next year with the furlough days and everything, we did save a bit more. So that's going to be helpful with the extra additional expenses going into next year that we're expecting, and looking at curriculum pieces, additional technology that we'll need to purchase in order to be successful in the fall. For number 2, I think you've all heard that they're still planning on the $9.0 billion level for the SSF going into, well, for 2021. So we're not needing to make an adjustment in regards to that at this point. Measure 98 is expected to be at 100%, although it's not until we go into special, it's not all nailed down completely. And for the SIA funding, it looks like they're going to reduce that down to about 33%, so around 1.2 million versus the 4 million that we were expecting to begin. So we've held off on all the hiring related to that. We're working on what that reduced budget will look like and what positions that will include. Number 4 in my notes, our employees have not received any of their payments through the employment department or the CARES funds. So that's the extra $600 per week. We did have an employee report to us, though, that the employment department did contact them with questions. So that means that they are going through our applications. And based on information from other districts, once we get to that point, it should happen pretty quickly. So I'm hopeful probably the end of next week that employees will be seeing some of that money. Let's see. And we have started posting other positions as the last note there that I had. Are there any questions on the numbers in general? I mean, I kind of reviewed the bottom line. I don't have any projected additional revenue or expenses at this point that I haven't already included in my notes. So if there's any questions, feel free.
I have a couple of questions. The estimated carryover is up about 630,000 from last month. Is that all attributable to the furlough?
Yeah, a good portion is the furlough, because once we closed out all the payrolls and all those encumbrances dropped off, that's where all that stuff started hitting the books. Yeah, and that I kept a buffer in there for like substitutes and to see where those final numbers would end up. So all that was taken off. And transportation. The transportation is our other big ticket item. We're still paying the company, but it was about a 12% reduction over those last several months. So I had kind of left that encumbrance in there until we saw some of those final numbers and final billings come in.
So there are three pretty big elements: the furlough, the transportation, and fewer subs.
Yeah, those are really the big ticket items.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned last month in these notes that a remote audit had begun. I assume that's because the auditors didn't want to be on site. Can you say any more about how that's gone or whether they're done?
Actually, they have not contacted us anymore. They gave us the list. We're putting all the documents in a secure file form, and they just pull them down. They have not. We sent them all of our check register information and all of that, and then they usually pull a sample. They usually pull a sample from that for us to upload all the documentation and backup for those. We have not received the sample. So we're kind of just going through our list and dumping our information in until we hear from them again.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. You mentioned the SIA budget that will be smaller.
Right.
And we may also have, although they're trying to hold the line on the state funding, I assume there may be other changes. Just remind me of the process and the board's involvement when budgets make big changes and how big they have to be and all that.
As far as like the reduction in that particular grant?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if we're going to have 1/3 the money in the SIA budget, it's, you know, we might just not just cut everything 1/3, but it might mean shifting some kind of emphasis or something like that. I just want to know where the board will be fitting in, if it's in place in the discussions about those changes.
Well, yeah, a couple things with that. So we had, with that particular fund, we had all the tiers developed within the admin team and the principal. So we'd probably go back to that plan. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be approved by the board again, but I'm sure that we can, you know, review what that looks like and what we kind of ended up with as far as priorities. We did, even though that grant was reduced, we did receive the CARES grant also. So that's the ESSER grant. And that's a $601,000 grant that we've been approved for at this point. So, and that wasn't in that budget. So those two are going to kind of balance against each other as far as the appropriation authority and all that sort of thing. I think we'll be able to get those numbers. But if you guys, if the board wants additional information or breakdown on all those pieces, we can do that as far as where we're going to allocate or we plan to allocate that funding.
I didn't check our policies before this question because it occurred to me just as the meeting was started. So I'll look at that, but I'm just looking for predictability as to what the board's role will be in that.
Right, right.
Okay. Any other board questions? Okay, thank you, Nikki. We will see you later on in the meeting. Okay, next we have Dr. Morlock to discuss our communicable disease plan.
Watch me hit the unmute button before I start talking. It's a big move. All right. So thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about this. I want to be clear that as much time as I spend learning about communicable disease and all the rest of those things as we go through this pandemic, I am not an expert in the disease kind of planning. So we'll go through some of this. I want to talk a little bit about the plan. It's part of our requirements before we come back to school this fall, or whatever school looks like. And so we had to make some adjustments and do some adds to put in the COVID-19 protocols. So it's been updated from our prior plan that we had with the applicable board policies we have, notification of presumptive COVID cases, so both employee and student, the screening and isolation protocols, how to maintain contact logs, our communication procedures with local public health authority and Oregon Health Authority contacts, entry and exit protocols, isolation measures, environmental management, and face coverings. Now remember, some of these things have continued to change in the last few days, so face coverings was another addition to that. The plan was written and reviewed by district personnel, including our district nurse. Several sources were used to put it all to bring those things in. So our current ODE guidance, the current OHA guidance, operational blueprint details from each school. It's included as a resource in the operational blueprints that we will eventually go submit to the ODE by the 15th of August. It's supposed to have a clear plan to share with school leaders and staff as we navigate through this whole COVID-19 pandemic, as well as communication flow charts, and then how to report presumptive cases, universal protocols to reduce infection rates, school reentry procedures, and things like that. So we do have multiple letter templates as well, and then we will continue to update, which means that this probably will be in flux as we continue to go forward, as we continue to get more and new information requirements from OHA and ODE. So I don't know if there are questions in or about the plan, but that is included in the packet. It's not just related to COVID-19, but that was the new additional protocols we had to put into it.
I know that it's lengthy, and I'm sure district staff have spent a lot of time on this, but I do appreciate the specifics of it.
Well, I don't want to keep asking all the questions, but I do have questions about this one too. So if somebody wants to go first, I'll let them. So I noticed on page 49, I don't know, that's 49 of our packet, I think. In the middle there's three paragraphs about employees complying. And the one I've got marked in blue, which won't help you any, that starts, employees shall report to the superintendent. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth paragraph. It ends with a sentence, no employee shall be denied the opportunity to provide service solely on the basis that the employee is infected with a communicable disease, except as otherwise prescribed by law. Well, that exception, I don't know what's in the exception. And so I guess my concern is, particularly in the COVID era, does this guarantee that a teacher has the right to go into class and teach if they're sick with COVID?
That would be, again, so this is specific to, so it's all of those diseases, right? So some of those that are in there, it means that you are not necessarily going to be denied access to be giving, to do instruction and all the things. But if you've got the plague, we probably don't want you in the school building. If you've got COVID-19, we have additional procedures. So COVID specific things come after 49.
Right.
And those have the screening and isolation protocol. So there are methodologies. So as an example, let's say somebody tests positive for COVID, they're going to be home. We can still, of course, they can provide that instruction from home, right? So we have some of that stuff happening now. Yeah.
So you can tell a teacher that they have to do it remotely if they're
sure,
sick.
because correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was allowed in the law. That was my first question. The second question has to do with stuff on page 51. Nope, sorry. Yeah, it's on page 51. And one of our speakers earlier referred to this. It says, these are, I'm right at the top, what happens when students enter the building. And the third one says, staff will be present at each entry point to visually screen students for symptoms. I don't know how I would be able to tell. I mean, can you look at somebody and tell? Or are we going to have other things? If we're in session at all during the COVID era, are we going to have, the touchless thermometers? Are we going to try to do more than just look at them and tell if they're sick?
No, we don't actually do temperature screening. So that's not in the guidance for us to be able to do. Visually screen means you look at them and see if they're sweating or if they're otherwise looking sick. I will tell you that school secretaries are amazingly good at picking them out of a crowd because they see them all the time as they come in the building. But that's only for visual screening. But we won't be doing any temperature checking at each one of them. So I think that question's come up a few different times.
Yeah.
But that's not
So
one of the things that we'll be doing as they come in the building.
So are you saying we're forbidden from doing that?
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, there are two problems with taking temperatures. Number one, they're not very accurate. And so we get false positive. And then I know that we've talked about this before, Brian, when you say, well, we'll get some of the ones that are, exceptionally hot. But then number two, I think it's actually within the guidance that says that we're not supposed to take their temperature as part of their entry planning. And I'll actually look and see if I can find it in the blueprint specifically. But Anne, you and I talked about this earlier as well.
I'll just say it, that seems relatively absurd.
There are a few of these things that are relatively absurd. I think that that's going to be our biggest challenge is keeping everybody as safe as possible within there. But at this time, I know that there are some places in Washington that have talked about getting some whole body scan screening things that they've talked about. But we're at this point not planning on doing temperature checks for every kid as they come in the building.
I'm unclear though. Are we forbidden by state law or something from doing that?
No, I don't think it's state law, but I actually think it's in our guidance, and I'm going to have to go back and see if I can find it for you specifically. But
it was mentioned by Colt Gilda State Superintendent in the press conference today that the governor did.
Right.
And he didn't give the reasoning for it, but he said the directive from ODE was not to take temperatures because he was asked that question in there.
Okay, well, go ahead, Brian.
No, I want clarification on, is this a actual legal prohibition on us doing this, or is this guidance, or what is the level of prohibition on us checking kids' temperatures when they enter the building?
That was the directive that we were given as part of they call it guidance, but it's really a directive. So today, if you watch the press conference, because some of us were spending our day doing some of those things, the question came directly to the governor. She passed it to Colt, said this is not just, the guidance is a directive. These are the things you can and cannot do. It's the same thing with the guidance on the percentage of cases of people who can come in when you can reopen school, the infection rates and things like that. So that guidance is actually, here's what you can and cannot do. And the temperature one is the one that was specifically asked today. And so we assumed that means that's a directive from us to not do the temperature reading.
Did they give an explanation as to why? I can go back and look at it if you don't have that answer.
I don't have that answer about but he didn't actually get into specifics about why they would not have you do those.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, what would happen to us if we went against that guidance and did it anyway?
The temperature checking cops would come after us. No, I really don't. I don't know what I'm not sure there'd be some kind of major punishment, but that's just not something that we have currently in our plan as we bring everybody in the building.
So I'm sympathetic to the problem of false negatives or false positives. I don't want to send anybody home as well, and I don't want to admit anybody who's ill. But I don't know how visual screening is going to be better than visual screening plus temperatures. So, or maybe other simple things we could do. I don't know.
And unfortunately, children are generally asymptomatic, and so we're creating a false sense of security by checking every kid out. Nobody has a temperature, and that's again, they also come to school in the morning, and their temperature is much lower because they've either been resting, they've got some medicine, and the temperature gets warmer in the afternoon, which is true for those kids. But that's the other thing that because children are generally asymptomatic, you're going to end up. What if you got no readings on it at all? So there's a certain false sense of security that I think I'd be worried about.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic, but I'm not quite sure that it's better to be false with less information than it is be false with more information. But I also want to ask about number 5. And this sounds like to me an undoable job. If you asked me to do it, I wouldn't be able to keep track of everybody's contacts as they go through. Is there a system that's going to make that possible? I mean, contact tracing logs with information about each student entered and other students with whom they came in during contact. Is this just where they sign in and we have timestamps, or how does that work?
Well, we got to remember the kids are coming in and on from a bus, or they're coming in from the same car. And so to the best of our ability, we're supposed to keep track of where kids are coming from. So we have some kids who will walk, some kids who take their bikes, and then other kids, of course, who come in on the same bus. And so we'll have some of those.
Are we doing that already, or are we geared up to do that efficiently and accurately?
Well, we're not doing it yet because we haven't had anybody come to school yet. So
you didn't do it last year.
Yeah, no, we did not do it last year.
Okay.
No,
All right.
we didn't have kids coming in the building.
Well, it sounds like I don't want to get into details of it. I just want you to tell me whether it's doable or not.
Yeah, it's going to be doable to a point. You know, the contact log that we have where kids are with each other somewhere in the building, we're not going to be able to keep track of every kid and with whom they're next to all day, every day. We also can't do that for what they do when they're not at school, right? So, you know, all the times that they're playing in the neighborhood or they're going to the grocery store or things like that. So the hope is that you have as much contact tracing as possible to see with whom they've had any kind of contact, and you know, if they've ridden the same bus or in the same cohort or in the same classroom.
Okay. My last question, I think, is about there's a couple places where it says that if somebody's sick, people will be notified. I'm assuming they'll be just notified that there is someone sick, and then they won't be able to be told who, or specifically maybe even how to avoid them or whatever. I mean, would the announcement just be, we found there was a person or 3 people in your class who were sick, that kind of thing?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, we don't use anybody's names. And then we go into the next part of it where we're quarantining, or we're you know, sending certain kids home, or shutting down the building depending upon the scope.
But if a kid was sick, we would send them home, and if anybody notices he's been sent home, the privacy is somewhat limited, but we'd still do it.
Correct.
Okay.
First, we try to put it, there are some isolation protocols. If they're not able to go home, we have a place to put them in isolation first in the building, and then they would be sent home as they could be.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions around the communicable disease plan?
It's not a question, but I'm not going to vote for it.
So you're not going to make the motion? I'm kidding. I say that in jest.
Definitely not.
All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. I would entertain a motion.
I move that the Newberg School Board District Board of Directors direct the superintendent to revise the communicable disease plan to include temperature checks of students when they come into school.
Is there a second? Dave, I think you may have been trying to second, but you were muted.
Yeah, I'll second that. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yep. With a motion and a second, is there discussion?
I think for me, I would want to know why it's not allowed, or we can't do it, or in the guidance we're not supposed to, before we go ahead and say we don't do it. If it's a good reason, then sure, let's not do it. But I would want to know what is stopping us.
In the interest of that, I am willing to move to table my motion and table consideration of the plan. Does that seem like a good idea to people?
You mean table it so that it would come up on the next, it'd be on the agenda for the next meeting?
Correct.
What, are we on some kind of timeline for
Yeah,
this?
that was my next question, Joe.
Do we have to meet a certain date?
No, I mean, well, yes, but it has to be passed before we can go back to school. And so before we can move on with the plans for school and starting up, but we'll be bringing those things back on the 11th as things have changed radically as of just a few hours ago.
So are we too discomfited if we push this off to the 11th too, so we can find out more about that particular item? Or even lobby the state a little bit about it if that seems amenable or whatever?
I'm sure this is going to be a common question
Yeah.
throughout the state. Yeah.
And I think I'm inclined to support Brian's motion if it has the effect of alerting the ODE and others that we're uneasy about some aspect, this particular aspect. And if it has any chance of having that effect and we're not hurt, then I want to do it. I think I want to support it.
I'm not sure that it's going to change the ODE's mind on requiring temperature checks statewide. But we can find out all that information and bring all those back, and then you can make that decision if you'd like.
I'm wondering if OD thinks it's a capacity issue in trying to get everybody's temperature checked, if that's why, or I don't know. I just would want to know more.
Hey, Joe, I just want to add, this is not an ODE exclusive conversation. OHA is deeply involved, and OHA is probably actually driving this conversation more than ODE is.
Yeah, I'm comfortable personally tabling it, but I don't think that we should table it with the expectation that we're going to greatly be able to change any of it. But I think tabling it for clarification could be helpful.
Okay.
I move to table.
Do you need a second for that motion? I'm not sure, Brian.
I believe I do, yes.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, is there more discussion?
Because of how this went, we're moving to table my motion to amend, and then we have to move to table the actual consideration of the plan.
Why don't you withdraw your first motion?
We could have the motion to adopt it with that amendment, table that, and we would only have the motion with the adoption on the floor. Just simpler, but I don't know.
It's your motion, Brian. How would you like to proceed?
I move to table my amendment.
Okay. And I'll second it because I don't want to, yeah, unless you don't want me to.
Okay, so to clarify, we are voting to table this conversation until this amendment until the 11th, until we can get clarification on the temperature point. Okay. Okay, any more discussion around that? Tabling motion. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and all those opposed? So passes 5-1. All right, so that will be, the communicable disease plan will be tabled until the 11th. Okay. And maybe we'll have more information by then.
That's fine.
Okay, back to Dr. Morlock. Let's talk about school reopening plans.
Okay. Well, we've had a few changes, so I'm going to go through a few things, and I think I've got Derek and Ann and Luke ready to support as well as we go through some of the blueprint things. So I'm actually going to just launch right in. Are you all ready to see that? No. Go back here. Except for Greg's not letting me screen share, so let's see if he does that. Let's see if he lets me do it at some point.
You didn't say pretty please, but I did it anyway.
Pretty please, pretty please. Sorry about that. All right. So we're going to start tonight. We're going to talk talk through the blueprints a little bit. We've posted them on line as we said we would. We talked a little bit about some of the hybrid issue or the hybrid kind of setup as we've discussed in those, and then I'll talk about the changes as we move forward into what's next in the next little while with the latest information that came out today from the governor's office at 1:30 in the afternoon. So these are the current plans as of 7 p.m. When we started this meeting on today. I'm starting to time date stamp everything because as the things go out, we find ourselves changing them more often than not. So the layout of the operational blueprints for re-entry include 3 primary things about health, which are the public health protocols, the facilities and school operations, and then the response to outbreak. So how we're going to operate the place, how we will clean it, what kind of health protocols we have to follow, whether students wear masks or not. That was a new addition just as of this last week, and any of those kind of parts that fit into that. And then the plan for the instructional piece is all supposed to be centered around equity, and you can kind of see that in the middle as one of the primary things about making sure that we're getting the students who need the most support that they can have each and every day. It talks about our instructional model, the family and community engagement, all the mental, social, and emotional health opportunities that we need to work on, as well as our staffing model and personnel. So I want to remind people that our number one thing that we're really trying to focus on are the health and safety of students and staff. I think it's actually really important for us to keep that in mind as we move kind of into what's happening in the short and the long term. We know it is of critical importance that we get students back into buildings as soon as we can and get them into school as we have had for many years in the past and moving forward. But we also know we have several things that are in play that are currently holding us back from those. Number one, and you've heard the statement before about the virus making the timeline, it's important to remember that we will be tracking those rates, and those are actually, and I'll show you the metrics in a little while, the metrics that will keep us either at home, in a hybrid model, or back in person. We are talking about the safety of 4,850 students and 550 staff members, many of whom are among the community and are paying attention tonight. And then also watching the science on the R0, which are the infection rates and the active cases. And I'll talk a little bit about how those metrics will come into play, as I said before. So all the things that we have put into our plan include, to the best of our ability, distancing, frequent hand washing, gallons and gallons of hand sanitizer, watching for sickness, face masks for all students 5 years and older, and then what happens when somebody really does get sick or is sick in the building, or if they decide not to wear masks and start sneezing on people. That's part of our behavioral issue. Recently, there were some studies that were done about just as they went through and surveyed and tried to find out about what additional expenses it may cost school districts to open. This slide shows that the average school district they were looking at was about 3,659 students. We're at 4,850. So the average cost for that district to do everything from adhering to public to the health monitoring and cleaning, disinfecting protocols, hiring staff that you might need for health and safety protocols, the PPE, personal protective equipment, and providing childcare and transportation if there are some additional ones you might do. Now, we would not necessarily do all of these, but we would have costs maybe in other areas. So, you know, it probably won't, but it could cost, if you look at this study, up to about 2.36 million if we were looking at trying to put those into play. Now, we have had access to some sanitizer and some other things that have come from large government stores, and they've come to us. And so Larry's actually been collecting those and stockpiling for us. So we're ready for some of those. We also have to recognize that we will spend money on curriculum. We'll spend some money on people doing some of the work, and we may have to spend money on other things as they come into play, possibly touchless temperature gauges. So again, we have a few options ahead of us, and the three options, of course, the first option is the one that we want to, and we will get to eventually. And we get the question all the time, like, when are we going to start school in person? When are we going to start school? And we're not giving a date because we really don't know, and not because we don't want to. I think tonight in public comment, you heard from Andrew Gallagher, the Vice President of the Newberg Education Association, they're ready to be in their classroom with kids too. This is not what any of us signed up for, but it is important to recognize that we have to do that when we have to be able to wait until we're safe until we can actually do that the right way. We also have a hybrid model, which is detailed in the blueprints. That's both the online and in-person, every other day. So that's the model we've been focusing on. And then of course, comprehensive distance learning, which is different than last year's distance learning, which we'll talk about in a second. But that would also be used in cases when we are not able to open our doors. So right now, we are not able, as I said before, not able to return to school full time. And that's why our plans are built around a hybrid model. We don't have enough open classrooms. There are some places in the state who have looked at opening. They have schools that have closed down and they're ready to be, they can be used as schools that are able to spread them out and have smaller class sizes and bring back specifically the younger grade levels, which they've been focusing on. For the hybrid, just as an overall, so they're grouped in A-B cohorts, means they're just in groups that come every other day. So they will come either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. They'll have a slightly shorter school day, possibly just focusing on core academics. The reason for the shorter school day is we won't have lots of things like additional recess. We'll be sending lunches home with kids. So there'll be fewer of those kinds of breaks, and with the focus on the content a little bit different, we will actually, as we do the math, it ends up seeing the same amount of instructional time, just condensed down to that. The content is mostly online or all online, so the content itself, the stuff that they're working on, and then the in-person is essentially to support students. So what that means is that you have to remember that we may have to go in and out of a hybrid model to a comprehensive distance learning model. And so the content, the curriculum, the things like that needs to be available online all the time, so we can make sure that it's wherever we are physically, we're able to get to it. And then there may be, we're focusing on looking at some equity-based selections of students who may attend more days, students who need additional support. We talked a little bit about that last time. We have not generated a metric on that yet, as we've been focused on working on Plan B. So this coming up, one of the things that I think has been very specific is that we did learn a lot. We turned around from taking a 2-week spring break to now all of a sudden you're going to do everything online, and good luck, and we'll see how you do. And that was last year's kind of a distance learning for all. Wasn't exactly like that. People actually worked really hard at trying to do their very best at putting things up, and we were trying to get through the end of the school year. We still actually had hope that we would return at some point in the future, and that hope never materialized. So people, worked very hard at it. We had some varying results on it. Some people did very well, and other ones struggled a bit more. This comprehensive distance learning means that we're looking at and looking for curriculum that is already built to be online and ready to go, so that we can do our in-person support. Again, used possibly in the middle of the year if there's an outbreak. So if we have to shift back over to that, so the content is available. So we're looking at trying to find, making sure we have the right setup for that, and that our teachers are also properly trained and prepared to teach in this new model. They've gotten some practice in the spring, and I know that they'll be ready for additional learning for this. We also have the Shehalem Online Academy. And it used to be it was the COLA program, and now it's COA. And so that online academy, we actually have had here in the district for several years. It's a fully functional online school. The class and the curriculum, they meet online, it's built for online, it's K-12. We can accept students from any Oregon district if they want to do an interdistrict transfer. Our own students can take it. It's a full online program. It's different than distance learning in that this one is very focused on the family doing the work, and so it's really a true learning at a distance that is supported by a couple of teachers who do some support when people get into some challenges they can't get past. But by and large, it is a self-directed curriculum. There are many districts who are looking at doing this or are spinning one up. We've actually had one running for several years here, and we have students who are already enrolled in it, and we have some folks who are interested in looking at that for next year. So those are our options. As we get to whatever our new normal is, and I want to reiterate that it will be, we'll be taking a cautious approach to getting through this whole school year so we can actually get to the place where we're back in person full time. And that's our ultimate goal. We want to be there. You know, we're not going to be able to put everybody inside of cages. I was doing a little research and I found a great little photograph from an Italian magazine from many, many years ago, where everybody's riding around in their own bubble. I've seen a few photographs in different schools where they've got people all working inside of a bubble as well. But that's really not what we want. It's not quite the new normal we're expecting. So a couple of things. One, we know that some families are going to choose COA or possibly another online academy. Of course, we would prefer that they choose ours if they want to go fully distance. This is a great option for our highly motivated kids and families who want to just, they want to learn at a distance, and they've been comfortable doing that. So we've had some pretty significant interest in that. Some may choose to attend there, and then we'll be asking families to attend minimally for a semester, if not the whole year. So it wouldn't be something that you come in and out of. It would be something that we would want them to choose to be in for minimally a semester, if not the whole year. Our plans, as we posted them last week, were starting with the AB cohort in a hybrid model, and then eventually getting to all students attending school as the health and safety options improve over time. Again, I mentioned this before, but we would be using comprehensive distance learning in cases of outbreaks. So when you have an outbreak at a school, or multiple students, and you have to shut down the school based upon what OHA tells you, you would move that school or several schools, depending upon where the outbreak is, to a distance learning model for a short-term turnaround. So it might be for the 2-week quarantine, and then we would come back to an AB hybrid. That feels disruptive as well. If you think about this, you start in hybrid, and then you're going to go to distance learning, and then you're back into hybrid, and you're back and forth. And there is some challenge in all of that. And so that's something that we will be discussing later on as we talk about, what's our best approach on these, and how to use that. But CDLs also originally was meant to be seen as, especially in cases of outbreaks in schools. At this point, and this is based upon what we have gotten from the governor, we are ready to basically say that all students this year will start in comprehensive distance learning. And I'll go through the metrics in a second. But it is important to recognize that we will be starting all students online to begin with. And then as the health metrics, and I'll show you the metrics in a second, when the metrics improve, then we will be able to start bringing in small groups and then getting to our full AB hybrid with the eventual goal of having kids in full time. So again, we'll start all students in comprehensive distance learning at the beginning of this school year. You'll see districts announcing that. Some have already announced those things, and then some, as today, as I said before, the governor made that announcement based upon metrics this afternoon. So, some of the things that we hear about transmission rates and younger kids not getting sick, and those are all things that are sort of true. I would suggest that, however, I don't believe that we really have a good handle on all of the science. I think this is really emerging, and I think that there are studies after studies, and they contradict each other, and they're coming out new, and there's still a lot unknown. I think this one here that came out by the Institute for Disease Modeling in Bellevue is talking about community spread. And as you recall, we had a situation where players on a club team in this town, it started with 6, then it was 9, then it was 20, and then it was 39. And so, community spread is actually where things are happening far more than they are in the workplace. It shows up in the workplace when they do testing But what they're figuring out is it is at social gatherings, things that are happening outside of school, and that's where people let their guard down a bit more. So it's important for us to remember that, and in this study, they're talking about significant growth of the epidemic. So as we bring people in and put them in together, that we could be pushing it even further away. So here are the metrics. We also, and I'll talk about Yamhill County tonight, but just as a reminder, we also cover parts of Washington County and Clackamas County. So we are a tri-county, and we have some of those that we'll have to be matching. First of all, for us to be able to reopen in hybrid or in a full-time, we would have to have within the county, this has to be met 3 weeks in a row. So each one of those weeks, we'd have to have a case rate of 10 or fewer cases per 100,000 in the preceding 7 days. So so it's 21 days, but the 3 weeks. So they do those checks. And then test positivity rate at or below 5% in the preceding 7 days. And the state metric also has to be met 3 weeks in a row. Okay, so state positivity at fewer than 5% in the preceding 7 days. So the metrics are fewer than 10 cases per 100,000, test positivity equal to or fewer than 5% in the preceding 7 days for 3 weeks, and the same thing for the state. So those, I thought, hang on one second, I'll make sure that I've got my little, there we go. Sorry, I was just off one, there we go. So I wanted to give you what those numbers look like for, this is just for Yamhill County. So in the week of 7/15, our case rate per 100,000 was more than 10. It was at 54.2. It did go down to 35.5 in the next week. And then the week of 7/19, it was at 39.2. Now our test positivity rate was above 5. It went down to 4 and then back up a little bit to 4.5. But as you can see that those 3 weeks, so we're not qualified, we would not be qualified in Yamhill County to open. And the similar is true in both Washington and Clackamas County. And so as we look, these are the kind of metrics that we'll be watching to see what happens when about the case rates. We'll be getting, of course, we get weekly updates on these, so we'll know what the numbers are. But this one is what puts us out, again, 3 weeks in a row, and then the state metric also has to be met. There was also some confusion today around about bringing students who are K-3 students in to school. That was part of the about the governor's thing as one of the exceptions. It is for very small and rural schools, number one, and number two, there are several other things that have to be met within that. It does take the number up to 30 per 100,000, but it really is specifically for very small communities who, you know, when you have one person get sick, it just spikes your number up huge, right? So there are very small Oregon communities where those, you know, a case or two, or if one family gets it, it can blow the numbers out. So they've tried to work on those. So again, some of the major things that we still have plenty of work to do on, and they're all part of these plans. Bus transportation, of course, trying to figure out how to do that safely. What our food service model will look like, and that will shift over time as we go from comprehensive distance learning to a hybrid, possibly back to comprehensive distance learning, or eventually into school full time. There will be curriculum changes throughout the system as we find a curriculum that will work, that'll be online, that's available for us. We do have some accessibility things through our ADA that we'll be working on, as we did in the spring. Technology access and connectivity, we did a pretty amazing job of getting folks connected. We know that there are still some people who will not have that connection, so we'll be working on how do we provide that for them. We know that childcare is an issue for families. We understand that that it's a very challenging thing when your kids are not able to go to school and you don't have a place to put them. We are working with local partners to see what we can put together to make that more accessible. There aren't a lot of spaces to be able to do it, so we're working on how we might be able to partner with some people to help us with that. That's also true of our staff who have kids in different districts, and as the state may open up at different times, it will be challenging for our staff members as well as they move forward. We also will, we've talked a lot about substitutes and where to get them and how to train them and try to maybe keep them within your district because you don't want them also moving around to lots of different schools and possibly being exposed and then exposing others. Staffing related to risk levels as well. So we have some work to do on what it looks like for staff who are at risk and may be at risk for contracting it more than others. And so we have some work to do in the HR around that. Our cleaning protocols, bathrooms, I know that Larry's done a huge amount of work on retraining the crew about what those kind of protocols look like, the right kind of chemicals that we can use, hand sanitizers, looking at washing stations and things like that. So there's a lot kind of in and around those things, but I did want to let people know tonight that we will be starting at comprehensive distance learning. And I also would like to mention, before we get back into some of the other questions about the blueprints, that we will also be bringing to the board at our August 11 meeting a request to push our student start day back to the 14th of September, which would be that following Monday. So we would normally be returning the Tuesday after Labor Day. But with all of these changes, we have a lot of work to do with our staff for training and for them to prepare a whole new curricula and everything else across the board. So we'll bring that forward for your discussion, for your consideration on August 11th to talk about starting with students a week later as we go into that. We, of course, I want to just state again, we want to get back to that which we recognize and getting back into class and doing that kind of an opportunity. We are asking everyone in the community, because this is really about community spread, to please, focus on your distance, wash your hands, and wear a mask. This is something that we, in May of this year, we were actually well under those metrics and could be seeing, at the end of May, we could have been actually looking at, and that's why we were actually talking about doing hybrid. And then summer hit and all of those things took a directional change in the wrong way. So I know that we can do this as a community. I know we can focus and actually beat this back, but we have quite a bit of work to do before we get to that piece. I think we'll pause there because there are probably lots of questions about the blueprint work as well.
Hey, Joe.
Yep.
How does the, not trying to downplay the, I mean, it's the numbers are the numbers, coming from different states and things, it seems like, one of the biggest things is our testing is so much more up. How do they look at that when it comes into those numbers? When we first started this whole thing, our testing was so, almost non-existent. Now we're testing through the roof. How does that come into play at all in their numbers?
As far as the number of tests go?
Yeah, because I mean,
what you're asking?
The more we test, we're going to, get more positive cases. We're testing, we're doing a much better job testing out there overall.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that has also happened with additional testing is that they're finding far more cases without a known source. And I think that that's been a big cause of concern. So as they continue to expand testing, they're also, and there is actually at the OHA website, there's a Tableau, which is a database rendering engine. We can actually show you what it looks like for the number of cases that don't have a known source. And I think that that's created, so they've done a lot of good jobs with tracing sources. They're testing people, they're finding out, then they're testing more people, they're finding out who they're connected to. So the case of the club baseball in Newberg, but they were able to trace that out to further. But there are far more cases now that seem to be skyrocketing just in the number of cases that they don't have a known source for. And I think that has caused a larger cause for concern. So they're not, I don't think their numbers are, I mean, the charts that we're using aren't necessarily related. Yes, if you test more people, you'll find out that it's actually spread further than we had imagined. But that probably won't change the way that they read those to us. I mean, the numbers are the numbers on those. Yeah.
The other metric that addresses that is the one that requires it to be 5% or under for a test positive case. So even if you're testing way more than usual, that metric will help us realize that the disease is not spreading. So I think they are taking into account, by using a combination of those metrics of total cases plus the percentage of case positive, that does address the issue of having more tests now than we did in the past.
Right, and kind of doubles the impact, because the more you test, just test the whole population, the percent should go down. And that the fact that percent is up, even though we're testing more, means redoubles the impact that it's actually spreading more.
Hey, Joe, on that one too, kind of what Greg and Ron just said. So like when we're, people really want to go back to school, and Drew said that from the teacher's angle, I think everybody's on the same page, but at the same time, keeping everybody safe. Is there anything common that you've heard from the state level where, like last time we have certain businesses that are so-called essential, and it's kind of silly that some of them are vape shops and different kind of things like that are left open and other shops aren't. We're taking one of our most prized things, public schools for our kids, and happen to alter. It seems to me, like I've heard this from several people too, it's like if we have to go to the extreme of making our kids go online, and we're really just going to try to, we flattened the curve once, now we've got to do it again, that it would just seem like the state would be, we're going to lock down. Let's, we're shutting our schools down again. Why we would not be letting all these, non-essential businesses stay open when we can't be open.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the thing where, I don't know, it's in Nevada or California or something where they're talking about casinos are open, but churches can't be open, so there's a big controversy about that kind of stuff. So I know
I do know they've actually been talking about closing the borders of the state for people coming in. I mean, there are all kinds of other solutions they're talking about, tourism, not letting people come in from bordering states, or doing some, health checks at the border. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on. We are also an essential business, but we're a really challenging one because we've got all these little creatures that come in, and they're not always really good at following the rules of not touching and not getting close to, and having their friends. And again, I'll reiterate the challenge, I think, around the science, and we hear these things about children not getting it as much or not showing as many symptoms. And I'm just afraid that we just don't actually know what it looks like. And there are, there's new research coming out all the time. So I want to have kids back in school too, but I am not willing to risk their lives or their families' lives or our staff's lives, because we have a lot of people at play, and it's just important for us to take this slowly. It's not the bestest and not the way we want to do it necessarily, but if we think about it, it's really only a year's time. It's not, it's not 20 years in the dark. It's not forever and ever. It's a time that, I was pretty hopeful in May, because the numbers were going the other direction and people were a little better about their masks, and now masks have become political. And, I talked to the Rotary group the other day, and they asked what they could do. I said, just tell people that masks aren't political. Masks are just about making this thing go away. It's the easiest thing we can do. I always explain to people, for those of you who drive the speed limit and actually put your seatbelt on when you get in your car, well, those are also government mandates. And so this is one of those things where just put a mask on for a couple more months or a couple more weeks, and things will turn the other way. I mean, we almost did it, and then we gave up. And I think that's the frustrating part, because people gave up a lot of their lives, and now you feel like, I got to do it all again, because we couldn't just follow the rules for long enough. And I think that's that's really important for us to do. And I think backing out, for me, I've been trying to get people to back out of the political on this. Let's just talk about what's real. Let's do the best we can. And when you're with your friends, wear your mask too. Yeah, it sucks. It's not going to be that long. It's only going to be a short amount of time, and we're going to get through this, and we will get through it. I mean, we will get to the other side, but we have to be vigilant. We have to follow the rules for a little while. I know that's hard.
Joe, is there any chance at all to be a little bit creative with our seniors of 2021? You know, when you look at how much they give up as juniors, and then you go into their senior year. And I know if we're not in school, you know, things change radically. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we could be really creative, you know, and with our staff, you know, our high school staff's got some really good people there to do some things for our seniors, so they aren't, you know, just to try to do some things where the mask, the socially distancing, you know, keeping them 80 feet apart. I don't know, but anything and everything, try to give them some more semblance of a senior year, you know, because if they lost their whole year plus half their junior year, there's a pretty big mental toll on them and their families too. And, you know, we finished last year with that great graduation, you know, so I know we can do some really creative stuff. That's just
and that's, you know, we want every kid to have a great experience, and especially, you know, the class of 2021, we want them to have a maybe quasi more normal one. But that's again why we, as a community and as let's just use our local community. If we just all get after it and just really work hard at wearing masks and washing our hands and doing those things, we can move our numbers down where we can start to bring people in. But it's, you know, I don't know what will happen in the wintertime. I don't know when a vaccine will happen. I don't know how many people will take the vaccine. But those all are factors into what happens in the springtime. And you know, we'll be working, you know, as we go into distance learning, we'll be working on making sure our hybrid plan is ready to go so we can pivot into that next. And then what does it look like to start bringing more kids in the future? But there's a lot of unknown right now. And I know that creates uncertainty for people. And I don't want people to feel anxious, but there's just a lot of unknown. And I think it's important for us to recognize that and then just say, but we'll do our best.
Hey, Joe, I've got a quick question regarding the sort of tri-county setup. So under the current guidelines, would our district reopening be impacted by Washington County and Clackamas County's numbers, not just Yamhill's exclusively?
Yes. And it's not just where students live, it's also where staff live. And so there are parts of that. As a parallel, let's think about snow days as a for instance, because snow days are every superintendent's most fun thing we get to choose to do. And in snow days, it's not always about how much snow is on the ground in downtown Newberg, but it's about how many staff can get here who might live in Washington County, who have to come across the mountain or have to come in from Clackamas or have to come under one. So in fact, one of the times last year, it was more about surrounding areas being highly impacted than we weren't able to bring them in. So it does mean the students we have within the counties and then the staff that we have. So yeah, we'll be impacted by those three. Washington County is not doing as well as Yamhill, but Clackamas is doing better. So maybe it'll balance out.
Is it your impression that if we appealed to them and said 98% of our students are from Yamhill County and the other people are from places that are more like Yamhill than the other counties, that we could get permission to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're able, we could probably develop a plan and say, look, we've got, you know, this many all happening here, or the folks in Washington County are really messy. We're just going to lock them at Washington County. We'll close them off at Dundee and make them all go to Dundee or something. You know, I think that we could make a case for that. I think it's important for all those numbers to be going the right direction. I think that's a big deal. And I think that seeing the up and down right now after the larger spike is going to make that challenging. But I'm sure there'll be some cases made. You know, part of the reason for using these metrics is that Oregon is such a varied state, and it's hard to say to somebody like Al C, who's got I think they've got 100 or 150 kids. You know, you're going to have to stay totally shut down because Multnomah County can't open up. And so I think that they've tried their best to really use the county-wide numbers as the metrics for opening, because there are such wide differences across the state.
Are there any other questions regarding the reopening plan?
Okay, so just to give you a preview, we will be now working, shifting gears toward our comprehensive distance learning plan. I will tell you that we have been working on Plan B for a few weeks now. As we watched the numbers change and started to read the tea leaves, we didn't know when that would all happen. So we will hope to have something to you for this August 11th about a better plan around what the comprehensive distance learning would look like, so we can move ahead on that. And then we will keep our hybrid plans as posted. We'll continue to refine those, because that would be the next shift that we would have to pivot into. And so those plans have to be solid as well for the following thing. But we will bring to you our best thinking around comprehensive distance learning and what we know what we know at the time, at least in August 11th. And I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So team, we've been at this for about almost 2 hours. Does anybody want a 5-minute break? Yeah, okay, let's do a 5-minute break. Sorry, Jeremy, but we'll meet back at 8:55.
Hey, you. Girl.
Well, Rebecca, it's 8:55 and it looks like it's just you and me. So what do we, oh, there's Inez. Okay.
I'm here.
The evil plans must be put on hold. No, I'm kidding. All right, 8:55, let's get back started. Karina, I'm sorry I didn't apologize to you before the break. I didn't see you there, so I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being with us. Okay, with that, I'm gonna hand it over to you if you're ready.
I am.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for the careful planning that you're doing to keep your community safe. So I can't imagine. I was telling someone earlier today that I'm seeing this play out across many districts, and I don't envy a single one of you. So thank you for the careful planning. But onto different news, hopefully better news today. We are here to tell you, to talk a little bit about where we are with the status of the bond development, and share with you a recommendation that came out of the Bond Development Committee meeting that met again last night, to share with you some polling information that we recently got as a tracker poll, and to talk a little bit about kind of what the next steps would be. So I'm going to start with introducing, many of you have already know Jeremy Wright really well, but introducing Jeremy to walk you through the polling results, because I think that will lay the groundwork. It is what we did with the Bond Development Committee last night, to lay the groundwork for conversations around what a recommendation would be. So unless you have any questions before we get into the polling, I think that is where we will go. Okay, and with that, Jeremy, I'm going to invite you to share your screen, if that is an option for you, and walk the board through. And you are still muted, Jeremy.
You guys hear me now? Okay. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to take a few minutes. Good to see everyone again, at least in this virtual format. I think the last time I was before this board was in February, when you made the decision to take a step back and continue to do community involvement and look towards a November election. Since that time, obviously a lot of things have changed. And in the last couple weeks, I guess the last month, the district, after doing some reflection, I reached out and said, let's get a temperature of where the community is at. So that's what I'm going to present you today. A survey that happened a couple weeks ago, get a sense of where people's appetite are for a school bond, as well as general perceptions towards the district. So no further ado, I'll jump right in. So what we did, this is our methodology. We surveyed 500 likely voters in the Newberg School District using combinations of landline and cell phone. Cell phone interviews represent 70% of the sample. So really highly rated there. Our voter file sample was used in the poll universe was diminished to reflect the likely November 2020 electorates, meaning that we made sure that the electorate looked like who's going to vote this November, which is a pretty big universe. Interviews were conducted a couple weeks ago, July 9th to 13th. And the margin of error is about 4.9%. I want you to remember that with some of these numbers, sometimes there could be some noise that isn't necessarily statistically significant. Throughout this report, we talk about younger and older voters. Younger voters are under age 50 and older voters are 50 and up. And the analysis, we also added in throughout this report the polls we did for you in both November of 2019 and this past February of 2020. So you can see some comparisons. So the very first question we always ask when we do these polls is the condition of facilities. So do you think Newberg school facilities are in excellent condition, good condition, fair condition, or are they in poor physical condition? This is a important question because the relationship between people's perception of your facilities and their yes vote on a bond is directly correlated. So you'll see here in the blue box, over here on the right, that 81% of people who think your facilities are in negative condition are going to vote yes on the bond. But overall, people's impression of your facilities are split. About 40% say they are only fair or in poor condition, and it's pretty much an even split, 40-38. About 22% undecided, and those folks typically are people who have no connection with the school. So this is one area of growth for the district. You guys can do a better job of getting people to understand the condition of your facilities and why you need to improve them. The number of people classifying your facilities as being in good condition is up since February. And that we think is probably, so if you look across, we asked people saying, back in November 2019, about 31% said your facilities were in excellently good condition, about 30% in February 2020, and about 40% now. There's a huge jump in folks who are saying they're in good condition. That's about a 10-point jump. We think that that's probably due to the fact that there's people who's not out and about, they're not in the schools, they're not remembering what the facilities are like. There's just a general lack of, just familiarity right now because everyone's staying home and not driving, etc. So the next question we asked before we got into bond specific was the handling of the school district's job. And down here in the bottom throughout this presentation, you'll see the actual question asked. We said, what type of job do you think the Newberg School District is doing to handle the coronavirus crisis? Are they doing an excellent job, a good job, only a fair job, or a poor job? 47% said good and excellent, and about 20% said only fair or poor. That's a great marks. 34%, it's about typical people who have no idea because they aren't connected to your schools. And there was a direct correlation in this orange box, direct correlation between people who vote yes, say they will vote yes on the bond, you'll see that in a minute, and their attitudes towards the district's response. So the better the district can do around COVID response and continuing with that the presentation Joe just did and all the hard work that's going into trying to keep students safe while educating them, students and staff safe, it will pay off on other things like a bond in terms of the voters' perception. Getting into the bond. So one of the things we would like to do is ask a question that out of the gate that mirrors what the language would be seen on the ballot. So there's on the ballot, you get 10 words for a caption and 20 words for a question. So this is on the right is what we ask voters. Bond increasing health and safety, replacing expanding schools, updating classrooms. And here's the question, shall the district increase safety, technology, replace, expand elementary schools, update classrooms, issue $141 million in general obligation bonds. Having heard this, if the election were held today, would you vote yes or no on the measure? So, that's exactly what they'll typically see on a ballot. You guys have 51% out of the gate saying yes, 32% no, 18% don't know. We circle in red here your yes strongly. That's 21%. We typically like to see that a lot higher. We like to see that closer to 40%. And like to see you get there by the end of a survey, if not at the beginning. Why is that important? It's because the more you bank strong voters, the less likely you are to lose them. Not strong voters, people who like the idea of it, but they find about what the actual cost is, or they have other concerns, they'll drop off and go into the no category. So our goal here, while these numbers look good, initial a good start for you, I think there's a lot of room for growth, especially among their yes column. Can bring people into a more strong position. You're up 4 points since the February poll. If you might remember, we were polling, and some of that is due to their electorate, as well as the overall attitude of the voters towards the district right now. So people were a little soured back in February on the idea of a bond, idea of a tax increase. They've increased 4 percentage points back to basically where you were in November 2019. So that's good news. In terms of people who support this, you'll see here on the margins, we see this pretty typically. There's a gender gap. Women tend to support education and tax measures more than men. Younger voter under the age 50 are more supportive than older voters. although you still are doing much better among older voters than you were in February. If you look across here and over age 70, you're plus 13 in this poll. You were minus 11 for February. That is mainly down to the expanded electorate of the November presidential election. 2 times as many voters are going to be voting in this November as they did in May. About 37% turnout in May. There'll be a 75 to 80% turnout this November. So you have expanded electorate, you're bringing more people in. People, surprisingly in your district, people with no college education tend to be a little more supportive than ones with college. We typically see a flip of that number in most places. And renters are more supportive than homeowners. I will show, and that's very typical as well. I will show a highlight for you though that you're down about 10 points among renters, and that is that's a point to be concerned about. That is where we typically see kind of the leading edge in economic downturns are renters, because they tend to be younger, folks who are new to the workforce, lower income, and they are and they're the ones who feel the impacts first. So you'll see some impact here, and I will continue to want to keep an eye on that. Because that's a place where while you have a lot of support, you could lose it just on economic conditions. You do great among people who are low propensity voters. So working up from the bottom here for a second, people who are generally only vote in presidential elections, you're plus 28. High propensity voters, people who are going to vote in every election, including dog catcher, you do worse. That's because they tend to be older, more established, homeowners, et cetera, the other demographic. You are killing it, doing very well among parents. Parent turnout will be crucial if you go to the ballot this fall, incredibly important, as well as people who are future parents, i.e. people with young kids and preschool, or people who were part of the school district. People who don't have any connection with the district, you're doing minus 29, and would love to see you pick up a few points there as they understand the conditions of the school. So finally, we tested 3 different packages for you guys. The first one was that 141 we asked out of the gate. What we did is give them a real world explanation of these 3 packages, what you would say in 1 paragraph. So 141 explanation was a bond that would increase student and staff safety, school security and disaster preparedness. The bond updates heating and cooling, and other critical infrastructure like aging roofs, and adds covered play areas to elementary and middle schools, while improving career and technical training programs across the district. The bond will expand and modernize Edwards Elementary, create flexible learning spaces, improve technology, improve science labs in the high schools. Finally, the bond replaces Dundee Elementary, an outdated inefficient building that has inadequate learning spaces and safety concerns. It would cost an additional 71 cents per $1,000. 120 million. A bond that would do everything we discussed in the last question, except updating science labs at high school and building covered play areas at middle schools and elementary schools. It would cost an additional 39 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. Finally, 105 million. A bond that would do everything we discussed in the last question, except improving a school health clinic and disaster preparedness. This bond would not update science labs at high schools, building flexible learning spaces, or covered play areas at middle and elementary schools. It would cost an additional 32 cents per $1,000. So we gave people 3 different options. And this is where we land. The most popular package, unsurprisingly, was the lower price, 105 million, the lowest tax increase. Your 120 and 141 don't have much difference between those 2, 47, 46, basically tied. The 141, note here, we lost 5 points and picked up more, 11 points into the no column, which is always concerning because we didn't just keep people undecided, we actually picked up no voters. And that's mainly down to the fact that we told them how much it's going to cost. We know this from human behavior. People always like what you're selling until you tell them what it's going to cost, right? And so at this point, you've lost some of your supporters and picked up more no voters because you said, okay, this is going to be a tax increase of this amount, 78 cents. So, it was a fairly short survey. We didn't get into messaging or any of that stuff. We just want to give you an idea where voters are at. Our recommendations. Bond timing. Given these results, we strongly recommend you move forward with November 2020 electorate. You're plus 61 among Democrats, 58 among Newberg school parents, younger voters plus 30, and low propensity voters plus 28. These are great margins, and those are the type of people who will vote this November. You don't have to worry about turnout as much in November presidential. You just have to worry about persuasion and making sure people vote their whole ballot. In terms of the bond amount, our recommendation move forward with either the 141 and 105. The 105 is the only one to break the 50+1 mark when we include the price per 1,000 and would require a less robust outreach. That said, we do worry that you're leaving some money on the table given the starting point for the bond language featuring 141 million. What does that mean? It means that most voters are only going to see what we asked at the front, because that's your bond caption, 10 words, question, 20 words. Most folks then do not get into the 175 word explanatory statement, or going into all the voters pamphlet statements, or going, reading, the 500 word statement in their voters pamphlets. So you do have a reasonable opportunity to pass the 141. And so we would also recommend taking the $120 million bond option off the table to just test the same as 141. Both the 141 and 105 will take a robust outreach. It's going to take a little more at the 141. But if we're going to, put something on the ballot, we think that you have an opportunity to get to that 141, especially since you, in terms of what the district needs, are greatly more than 141. So I'll stop there and open up to any questions. Or Karina, I don't know.
No, I mean, certainly we want to be sure that we have any questions answered before we kind of move on to talking about where we ended up with the committee last night. I think you're talking, Ron, but we can't hear you. At least I can't hear you.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
I've got two channels going here because my other one was breaking up. So I'm talking out of the blank, but you can see it.
You're a good ventriloquist, Ron.
Yeah. If you go to the slide that showed the three measures and the extra cost, I think it was a description for the people. And the extra cost goes down pretty dramatically from 141 to 120, like 32 cents or something, from 71 to 39, and then it only goes down 7 more. Why does it go down 32 cents to drop the first 21 million and only 7 cents to drop the next 15?
That would be a Nikki Fowler
yes.
Piper question.
Yes. And actually, Nikki can answer it, but we also, since we did the poll, have, I think, received even better numbers. So.
Oh, okay.
So let's get that and get the numbers down so that it doesn't quite make sense to me why 21 million drops 32 and 15 only drops 7.
We would have to go back and get the detail from Piper Jeffrey on that. There's many variables in that calculation. Some it has to do with,
can I interject? I think that we did have this discussion before the poll went out. So the poll went out correctly, but Jeremy's slides might be using the 39-cent number at 125. We actually changed that, I think, to 48, if you remember, Nikki, before it went out in the poll.
Yeah.
My slides, I pulled that number. Let me make sure. Yeah, you were correct. That's my mistake. That's a typo on Right Public Affairs side. Thank you, Greg.
Okay, that makes more sense.
48 cents, yeah. That was, yes. Apologies.
Okay, so it goes down 24 and then 20. 24 and then 12 or 14 or something. Okay, all right, I can handle that. Thank you.
Jeremy, in our February meeting, I believe you said there was a sort of a baseline starting yes vote number that you want to have a good chance of success. I don't recall what that number was, but could you remind me what it was and tell me?
Yeah, so there's a couple variables. We and these are not hard and fast rules. One of the things I said last night to your the bond advisory group as well, which is that you can, let me say them first. Typically, we want to see about 55% support. We want to see somewhere between 35 and 40% strong support. And we want to see the negative, like people who are very strongly no, about 25% or less. And so you are below that initial viability threshold. That said, that we just won in St. Helens with a tax increase of 55 cents per 1,000, and they never polled above 52%. But they win, and they won with 51%. So there's the reason we want that 55% number is because it gives you a buffer, because you typically lose voters. So the closer you are to that 50+1 number, the less margin of error you literally have to win within. 55 is that, so that's our general guidelines, because most people from your undecided pool will break no. So just make an assumption that 60 to 70%, if they're undecided a week out, are going to vote no on a tax measure. We just know that behavior, and so that's why we want the buffer, because then you can't assume you're going to keep 51%. So.
Yeah, I think another element that we talked about last night with the committee is, as they were, as you can imagine, having the same sort of quandary that you guys are in terms of the $105 million package that does get us, I believe, at 56% is at least first ask, compared to the 51% of the 141 million was, first of all, you can't compare those numbers directly to one another, because in a bond election, you aren't going to ask them, do you want this or do you want this, right? You're just going to make a simple ask. And so those percentages come as they ask different rounds of questions. So that was one thing to consider. The second is, as the district was thinking about and the bond development committee was talking about yesterday, the cuts that had to be made to get it from 141 to 105 eliminated elements of the bond that we think would be those that are most marketable to most of your communities, meaning it would ensure that to follow sort of Jeremy's, one of his strategies is ensure you have a chicken in every pot. Obviously not the first person to come up with that strategy, but and by cutting it from 141 million to 105 million, we were losing projects that impacted a lot of the elementary schools and spread across the high schools as well. So that was, I think, across the high school as well. So that was the that was a major component of the conversation that we had with the bond development committee last night, and a major reason why they voted unanimously to recommend to you moving forward in November with $141 million bond. Any questions?
Katrina, are you doing a presentation after Jeremy, or should we save our questions that we have for you, or should we ask those now?
No, that was our presentation essentially, is the conversation around the polling information, and then the formal recommendation from the bond development committee.
Corinne?
Yes.
Could you mention about the grant that we will qualify for?
I sure will. So another element that has changed between when we met last time in May, I think it was, or April, is that the school districts that have that were in the running for the state matching grant, which is the awesome grant, has reshuffled. Some won the election in November, and so therefore they were removed from the pool, or in May, and so they were removed from the pool. Some people that were going to go in November have now fallen away, and the result of that is that Newberg has now been locked in as securing a little over $5 million in awesome grant matching dollars from the state should you pass your bond in November. So that was another element that came into play.
So I have a question. It's just sort of a general how bonds work. You know, this is all kind of new to me. So one of my concerns is that we pass this, we issue all these bonds, and then the local economy falls off a cliff. Property values fall. My understanding is the tax is based on assessed value of properties, so the amount paid in taxes would fall. What would be the potential financial liability for the district if something like that occurred?
I don't, Nikki, if you want to talk a little bit about kind of what the work you've done with Piper Jaffray or Piper Sandler, I can talk a little bit about bonds in general, but if you want to talk, Nikki, about the work you guys have done with Piper Sandler on this.
Yes, let me put my video back on here. Yeah, I mean, we've worked with them. We haven't, they get paid out of the bond proceeds. So they've been doing a lot of this work ahead of time. The bulk of the money spent this time is through the polling, through the bond work and working with Brick as far as the front end of all of that. If we delayed the bond and say a year or two, couple of years, we'd have to reapply for the Awesome Grant. Those, we might not be in the running, you know, we could be, because we are not high on the priority list. We'd have to start over with the polling because all the demographic and everything could change and shift over time. So we'd be having to spend that money twice to get back where we are right now, as far as those costs.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, to speak to kind of the general gist of the, you know, prognostications, for lack of a better term, while the bonds are based on assessed value, and over time, you know, in a downturn economy, the assessed value could drop. What typically happens is that the percentage that Piper Jaffray uses in terms of what their either rate of growth in a district or stagnation or decline, they change that in every run that they do based on kind of economic forecasts of where we are in Oregon. And so there, I will tell you that historically Piper Sandler now has been very conservative in their estimations. And so that's why you see a lot of school districts reaping pretty significant bond premiums. I think a neighboring district that passed a bond in May saw some bond premiums that, quite frankly, I haven't, some significant bond premiums, like $18 million on $75 million worth of bonds. And so while there is there's always a risk, I think you are in a somewhat better position because your dollars buy you more as well, right? So the cost of construction would come down in that case as well. So that's, I mean, I think if you want, I am not a bond finance person and I don't want to pretend to have that expertise. So if you want greater detail about what that exposure of that risk would be, I think we would want to get folks from Piper Sandler on the call.
So I guess I'll blame myself, and maybe I didn't fully communicate my question adequately. What I'm really trying to understand is what is the potential liability situation that you can find yourself in if you pass a large dollar bond. You know, we issue those bonds, we're obligated to pay those bonds back with interest, and then the tax base that we use to pay for those bonds falls. How does that we're still liable for those bonds. So what is the worst case scenario we could find ourselves in if that were to occur?
We'd be on the hook to pay for it. I mean, there'd be no way around it. The likelihood of it going that far, because like Karina said, they're very conservative in their approach in those estimates and basing the estimates on history. And but yeah, we would be on the hook whether there'd be a refinance in some way or other methods. I don't know. We'd have to look into that.
I can say that I've never run into that in all of the years that I've been working, over the 20 years that I've been working in Oregon.
Right.
Other thing to remember is that when a vote is made to authorize the sale of bonds, so let's say it's the 141 million, it may be that the district doesn't sell all 141 because we do have a time limit on the time from which we sell the bonds, whichever bonds we decide to choose to sell, the number, and the time that we have to have substantial completion of the projects. So because of our size and this kind of the scope of the projects, we would probably be looking at multiple bond sales. It wouldn't be happening all at once because trying to run all of those projects all at once. So it reduces the initial numerical risk because you're looking at a smaller kind of a number of those. But when you authorize that sale, then the tax money that comes in that's what's used to pay those. I think that's another important thing that people sometimes forget, that now you've got 141. It's like, actually, no, we're going to sell the portion we need to build a new school, or we'll sell the portion that we're going to do a bunch of the HVAC work. So there are ways that you actually package them into smaller ones based upon what your capacity is to actually complete projects, and that's a fairly significant part of the planning as you look forward into it.
Yeah. It's also based on the bond market at any particular point in time. So that is why you would have Piper Sandler essentially work with you to package your bonds, to time it right, to ensure that you're not running in danger of arbitrage, which is what Joe was talking about, that you are not outpacing a potential recession in getting yourselves out in front of your skis, and ensuring that you have cash in hand when you need that to pay off your construction work primarily.
I'm sorry I couldn't make the Bond Development Committee meeting last night to observe it, so I don't know if you talked about this, but I haven't been content that we have a strong enough story as to why we're doing this. I mean, we have the general need. Sure, we have to update our buildings and stuff, and I guess that's okay, but it doesn't convey sort of an urgency or a sense of story as to why this package right now fits our needs now. I think I had that sense before COVID altered our vision of the future to some degree, and we don't actually know what that future is like. Did the Bond Development Committee talk about this issue at all? What's the theme of this election? What is it we're addressing? How are we gonna make this a human interest story that actually, motivates people?
We spent some time certainly talking about conversations we could have around COVID and reopening schools and living in a post-pandemic world, and how the investments that we're making now, or the authority to make those investments, would put the district in a better place. We looked specifically at the different types of projects that we're considering in the $141 million bond, because I think at that point the group had made their recommendation, and talked about creating that story specifically around sort of pandemic preparedness or addressing infection control. So we looked at things like increasing capacity, which would give you a greater ability to provide that social distancing. We looked at improvements to your community health that's currently at the high school. We looked at certainly everything that's in the deferred maintenance or maintenance improvement funds as opportunities to improve your indoor air quality and add filtration and address things that, again, speak to what we know as architects and engineers is our good means of infection control. And so those are conversations we've had. I know that as we move forward into this next step and the conversations that Jeremy has already been having with the district, I mean, this is where, once you get into a campaign mode, is when you start to craft those stories. And Jeremy's familiar enough with the projects to be able to say, all right, we know based on your polling that your community is going to be moved by these types of stories. And so that's the messaging that he would provide for us. And he was the one that actually drove us to really create that COVID messaging as well, because he knows that that's a big driver right now. So Jeremy, you want to speak to any more of that? You're on mute.
Sorry,
No.
I would add that I think anytime right now you can speak to the moment, right? To your question, which is obviously meet voters where they are. And, and right now where voters are concerned about the economy, obviously, but also very concerned about the health of students and staff and the general community. So if you can competently, the stuff I saw yesterday with the bond oversight and some of the work, by development, pardon me, if you can speak confidently to what you are doing to start to address distance learning, technology, student and staff health and safety through a bond, because with the idea being, okay, maybe this particular pandemic may pass, but we all know that there's health and safety is always a concern, and it could be the next, right? And so voters this November are going to be thinking about that. And so we'll have to craft and tell that story. And you have to make sure your bond has stuff in it that can tell that story.
Yeah, that's exactly my point, because everything that's on the shopping list was decided before the COVID virus hit. And I don't know if I can point to anything that says, oh, this is what we learned something and look what we put in here. We're going to fix that, or that relates to the crisis.
Sure.
I saw stuff yesterday that had, on that list, Karina and her team put together, so maybe we can share that. But, here's like filtration and all the stuff that Karina just listed off. Here, she's doing it. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so this is just the preliminary pass that said, okay, since we've been dealing with COVID, we went back and we looked at the types of projects that we're talking about, and we said, based on what we know we're wanting to create in a post-pandemic or current pandemic world, here are the positive benefits that a project like this would allow the district to be able to use those projects and the dollars of those projects to be able to actualize that. So, it's easy to craft a story around that. I think the other pieces that we've talked about that the committee visioned, and certainly I would invite Rebecca and Brandy, who have been alongside us the entire time, to chime in here, but talking about improvements to CTE and STEM, and being able to really think about workforce sort of impact, right? Creating stronger workers, graduates that are ready to go to work in a community that values that. The expansion of Catalyst, certainly as you heard today, people are going to be thinking about looking at alternative ways of education, whether it's through your online academy or through just an alternative education program, and investments that you make there will have that impact as well.
So,
and go ahead.
So if we were to have reconsidered this list in light of our experience in COVID, I could imagine, for example, that the Catalyst expansion would be redescribed as the Catalyst and COA expansion, rather than just a Catalyst expansion. Or the tech upgrades, we would highlight things where we're going to be able to make it possible when we have to do distance learning that everybody can get at it. I don't know, well, I guess my question is, how much of that kind of refiguring of the actual elements? I would like to be able to tell people, we had a proposal in February, we've had this experience, here's some things where we adjusted to meet the need, rather than sort of reverse explain, not necessarily reverse engineer, but reverse explain stuff that we already thought we needed in February. See what I'm saying? I mean, sure, we can go back and say, look, these accidentally have the things we need, but I would like to be able to say, people, no, we redesigned this because we recognized in this experience that we're not ready in these areas as much as we need to be, and this is what we've done. Catalyst and COA rather than just Catalyst. Can we actually little bit tweak these categories so that they explain that? I don't want to disrespect the bond committee's work at all, of course not, but I just don't, I just don't know that it's as persuasive. So, oh, it happens to be the same list as we had in February.
Yeah, I think the reason that it is the same list that you had in February is because there are some needs that aren't changing. It is, however, an opportunity to look at those projects, and just as you're saying, I mean, one of the things that we did do is say, you know, the maintenance improvements of $18 million, we are going to prioritize the HVAC upgrades and additional filtration as a part of that, right? So that is a tweak that happened. Same thing when we were thinking about, you know, that's the exact conversation that we were talking about when we looked at Catalyst. These are project descriptions that were, you know, that dated back to February, because we did want to honor the work of the Bond Development Committee, but these are not the descriptions. You are not tied to using these descriptions to explain this to your community, right? And so that is the opportunity. And the district has done that work to go in and say, all right, you know, check that these projects really are still relevant, number one, and will position them best to tweak them to respond to the current reality of today and moving forward to tomorrow.
Who does that reframing or
our bond steering team, which would be myself, Jeremy, and the executive team in the district.
And whoever's running the PAC, or I mean, I don't know who's doing the campaigning. That part.
Yeah, that's more of a campaign. Yeah, I mean, Jeremy can talk about the sort of firewall that you have to set up there, but yes, there's an element of that becomes, I mean, the informational piece will all come from the district, and then the campaign messaging will come from the PAC.
Okay, in the interest of time, are there any other questions at this point? Nope. Okay. Thank you, Jeremy and Karina. And thank you for last night's meeting as well. It was definitely a productive committee meeting. And I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you.
Thank you. Goodbye, y'all. See if there are no more questions for us.
Yeah, we'll hang out.
Thank you.
I have a question about what happens next, our next step.
Okay. Yeah.
So my question is, what's our next steps?
I think there are immediate next steps. There are sort of next steps in terms of our process, right? So our bond development committee, essentially, they are done. They've developed their bond package. They will come to you formally at your August 11th, I believe it is, board meeting to make that formal recommendation. At that meeting, you have to take action to decide to put that on the ballot, because that has to be to the Secretary of State by the 15th of August in order to be placed on the November ballot. And then there's a simultaneous process that Jeremy will work with the team on to create messaging, to create packaging, to do your voter education campaign, which is what you or at least certainly the district staff will do, and then to work with your PAC to get the campaign started. So I think those are all the next steps that I can think of. Jeremy, can you think of anything else?
Okay. And I saw that there's also for our attendees, if you have questions regarding this, it's kind of a tough setup to try to answer them, especially from board members, but I know Greg's been doing a great job answering questions. But if you have further questions about this, feel free to email either Joe and Greg or myself or the board, and we can try to get those answers for you as well.
I'm sorry, I have another question about the PAC. Who sets it up and when? Sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
I need to know who sets up the PAC and when.
That is a decision for the district, and I would say yesterday. Right? I mean, we need to, this is, in all cases, a bond is a heavy lift for a district, and so you need a strong PAC. And I know that the district, even when
folks have already started talking about forming a PAC, and I think you guys have a committee left over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now it's not go time.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Okay, so I know we have board member that has a hard 10 o'clock stop time. So that leaves us 21 minutes to do our goals and approve these resolutions. Nikki, did these 2 resolutions need to be adopted in a timely manner, or can we put them on next board meeting agenda?
You can probably put them on the next board agenda if you really need to. They're just an annual renewal for our depository, our banks and stuff. So it's just a formality piece, or it would probably take you 1 minute to pass if you wanted to get them out of the way.
Okay. Well, what's the feeling from the board? Do we want to tackle goals next? Do we want to have another meeting for goals? Do we want to try to just do it all quickly in 20 minutes?
I'd like to move that the Newberg School Board of Directors approve the board. No, nope, not that one. The one I wanted to read, read the wrong one. Isn't there a motion here? I don't, oh, it's beyond it, isn't it?
At the bottom.
Yeah. I move that Newberg School District Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2020-02, resolution authorizing deposit and withdrawal of funds by title only.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second. Is there discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, passes unanimously.
I move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2021-01, resolution authorizing deposit, withdrawal, and borrowing of funds by title only, and I apologize for doing it in the wrong order.
I'll second.
Discussion? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And it passes unanimously.
Wait,
Thanks.
can I clarify? I missed that you did it in the wrong order. How did you do it out of order, Ron?
I did the last one first and the first one last.
You did 03 first?
I did 02 first and then 01. Is there an 03? There's an 03. Okay. I move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2021-03, establishing designated school district appointments, financial auditors, and legal counsel for the 2021 school year.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion?
We should have somebody who can count do these motions, I guess.
No, but you jumped in and that says a lot. All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, passes unanimously. We got them. Okay, 18 minutes now. Board goals. We just have the 2 left, one of which is the bond and one of which is safety. So why don't we start with the bond? I don't know if you all, Greg sent us a copy of the working document. I'm not sure if everybody can see it, just in case you can't. Bond, there are 3 points under this goal. One is to continue the work with the Bond Development Committee. I think we should add the PAC to that if we continue with it. Number 2, ensure the bond package is equitable. And number 3, support bond packages put forth to voters. Is there discussion around this? Is everybody comfortable with adding the PAC to number 1? So it would read continue.
No, I think
yeah,
we're supposed to have a little wall between us.
You know when that email was sent?
It was sent by Greg.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to share a screen, but I'm having difficulty at the moment. I'm working on it.
Yeah, still would need good. Okay, let's see. Board goals, Greg. Oh, okay. I have it as July 11th. Is that the right one?
It could be. I already have it open in my documents and I'd have to go back and get out of my agenda and my email.
Says,
okay, I apologize. I have a new computer and I have not authorized it to share screen with Zoom yet. And I cannot do that without quitting out of Zoom, which I'm hosting. So I'm not going to be able to share my screen. I apologize.
Okay.
Greg, do you want to send that to me?
I guess could I share screen? I mean, I've got it up.
I could share screen. I think.
I shared with Joe or Brandy. You can do it if you would like.
I think I've just done it. Does everybody can? I tried to do it.
Oh, Ron, I think it's you. Yeah, that's you.
Have I shared my screen?
Yep.
Can you
okay.
see the mountain behind? I'll make it big.
You do.
Yeah.
So we discussed A and B at our last discussion around goals. So now we're on to the C and D. My suggestion was to continue to work with the Bond Development Committee and PAC.
I'm worried about the wall that we're separation that we're supposed to have with the PAC. I don't know if we should put it in there. I mean, we're going to work with whoever. The Bond Development Committee and others, we could say, but I don't know if we should be working with the PAC.
I think the board, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I feel like the board can.
The
but
board
district
can.
can't.
I think
Okay.
it's just district
Administration.
people that can, yeah.
Okay, then fine.
All right. Well, since you shared screen, you've got to be our typist as well.
Oh, I do. Jeez, you got to do everything around here.
Yeah. All right. What about any other thoughts, questions, ideas around those 3 points? Nothing? Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to safety, D. So work with the district to support the reopening plan. Actively assure that ODE, OHA guidelines are followed. Balancing guidance with community needs and equity in approach and support. Thoughts?
What do we mean by balancing guidance with community needs? We've been told that the guidance is sort of mandatory. I guess when we postponed the decision, that was sort of us doing that, I guess, huh? Is that the kind of thing we're talking about?
Brian, I feel like this was one you had a lot of thoughts on when we kind of crafted it. Do you have any thoughts on it now?
Are we talking about the specifically number 3?
Any of them, 1 through 4, just the goal in general.
No, I mean, it's a one day at a time sort of approach, right? I think sort of, you know, what we did tonight, where we, instead of just rubber stamping the reopening guide, we sent it back with some requests, is, you know, us doing that.
Okay. Any other thoughts around the safety goal?
I apologize for fiddling with the screen. I forgot I'm filling it for you too.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'll stop.
No, I'm glad you did that, because if we don't have more discussion around D, I'd like to just go up to number 3 really quick, because Bob had, I'm sorry, goal letter B, point number 3. Convene a study group to examine how a personalized learning plan could be created for every student in the Newberg schools. The only reason I bring this up, Bob specifically sent an email saying, hey, I don't know if I'll be able to be there due to reception, but while I support this idea, I don't support it for this year's board goals, because I don't think there's going to be realistic resources of staff time available to do that. I wanted to make sure his thoughts got out there.
I would agree with that. I think we have a lot on our plate with both trying to get back to school and taking on the bond. So I'd be happy to remove it if everybody else is okay with that.
I wonder if we could just, because the word convene means that somebody has to get together and start studying, and that's the issue, whether the staff is going to be able to do that. I wonder if we could say prepare the district to examine or something, so that it's on the agenda and we'll get to it as soon as we can, but not commit ourselves to making staff do that this year. It's kind of a modified version of the bone pile. Because I think this is a goal that would be, I mean, or explore with or something, so that, I'm sorry, gotta quit fiddling with it. Something that would not drop it, but would not put it on, insist that it be on the agenda this year, because we're gonna fry our staff this year already.
I don't think we're going to forget about it in the next year.
Well, if somebody promises not to forget about it, that may solve the problem too. But yeah,
somebody. I also, I hear what you're saying, and I hear what Inez is saying. I am reluctant at the thought of trying to have a goal that's not really a goal. Do you know what I mean? Like of sort of putting it there, but we're not really taking action on it, or I don't know. It doesn't.
I don't think Bob will let us forget it.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
And I think that I agree with you. If we don't anticipate taking any action on it, we should leave it off until we can. Then we know the goals are not placeholders.
Well, what if we changed, instead of convening a study group, we made it a goal to discuss what our goals for a study group would be?
I think we will be learning that because it's on the agenda for next meeting, but we'll be having discussions around creating ad hoc committees for calendar start time issues and also equity. So those could serve as a good sort of learning tool and model to have future committees or study groups. So I think we could leave that on there because I think we will be doing that in a different way. I don't know if that hits what you were trying to get at or not, Brian.
or another option might be for us to commit that we will study it in preparation for later, rather than asking staff to study it. We'll have some of us study it, not necessarily the whole board, but we could do that.
Okay, so
any of these things, I'm just asking us if there's a way to keep the idea alive in honor of those who proposed it, but doesn't put the burden on the staff. I'm comfortable if we just decide to remember to bring it up next year.
Brian, Dave, we haven't heard from you on how you feel about it. Should we keep it on here as some kind of adapted goal, or do we keep it in our heads for next year?
I'd like to keep it on, at least for, discussion purposes.
I agree with Ron. I think it's, it's a really good thing to think about, and we could, who's ever interested on the board could jump in and put a little bit of work into it, and then, at least we'd have some stuff done on it when we have time. It doesn't have to be the highest priority, but get some of the legwork done, and then, be talking to Joe and his staff, and then how he'd want to proceed with his staff.
Okay. Yeah. Ron, do you want to type it in how you were wording it with regards to board? I don't know if you want to say
I'll type a
separate.
I'll type an additional version here so we can see it. I don't want it to be number 4. I don't know. Study the possibility of personalized. Why is it telling me that? Shut up.
All right. It's okay.
Got it. Personalized learning plans for every student, for each student, for every student.
Will you add board to that? Like maybe board study or
board study to will study. Do we want will? Something like that. This is a rough draft. I can fix it.
May shall. I like may better than will because it's a little more fluid.
Intends. No, this is a board, so yeah. I don't say will, but yeah. I don't know what to say.
Just say will. I do have, since we're under the learning section, I actually had an interesting conversation with a community member today. It was actually regarding the topic of equity. And one of the things that we both sort of came to was that one area where students who, for whatever reason, we would classify as disadvantaged, one area where they often really, I think, get let down by our school system is in the area of financial education. And that is an area that can have a very dramatic impact on the course of their lives. So I would really like us to consider, and you know, it may not be this year, but I would really like us to consider being a school district that commits that by the time every student graduates high school, they have a working knowledge of personal finance, you know, how to balance a checkbook, how to write a family budget, how interest works, what the implications of getting a high interest credit card when they're in their first year of college is. I think that would go a long way towards improving outcomes for all students in their adult lives. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion. I don't know that it's a goal that we can put on for this year necessarily, but I do know that there are conversations between community partners and the high school and Catalyst regarding this. So, you know, I agree with you. I'm not sure that it's a board situation, but do know that conversations are being had.
So in terms of point 3, I took the word will out. There's no, these are incomplete sentences, and so there's no will in any of the other ones I found. So
how about board to study the possibility of?
Yeah, we could do that, but my point is that they're all in this pidgin English anyway. But if the board wants me to put something in there, I'll be glad to do it.
Thoughts?
I had somebody today also say the same thing. I've heard that for, you know, a long time. I've heard different words attached to that type of thing, like a practicalities class, a life studies class. I've heard that for a long time. I think it's something that it's so basic. I don't even know why we haven't done it before. I had some of that stuff when I was in high school, but you know, we're talking the 70s. I think that you know, a lot of kids don't get that at home. I don't know why we can't get that in quicker than a year or two. It seems like it'd be a pretty popular class with a lot of kids, and I'm sure we have a lot of teachers that, you know, could teach something like that. McMinnville High, just so you guys know, McMinnville High School has a class, and a friend teaches down there. They have a class called music theory, and they use it for history, mathematics, English, and it's called music theory, and kids flock to this class. And with music as a tool, they reach their kids for all kinds of different subjects, and it's really successful.
I'm a little worried about us making goals for specific classes. That's getting down in the weeds.
Well, and I don't know that that's part of our job as a board. You know, we govern, not get into the weeds.
I think having a policy that requires us to teach kids basic financial knowledge could certainly be a board matter.
Well, yes, but we haven't been teaching basic human rights knowledge either, so we can get into that too. But we don't have time, so let's not go there.
That's a different topic.
I agree. I think both of these are different topics in regards to the board goals, and I'm just going to try to keep us focused on the ones that we have spent a lot of time and effort compiling. Are there other questions regarding any of these 4 goals, or can we as a team say these are the goals and we can start progressing?
How are we going to ensure that the bond is equitable? I mean, I would want more definition around that, but again, I know we're running out of time, so.
The virtue of these goals is that it puts us all on notice and the public on notice that these topics are topics that we're going to work on this year. Stating the goal doesn't, I mean, we're stating the goals at this point. All these goals have extra work in them, and including defining what equity means. So I think for now, what we've done by putting it in there for the bond package is that we've made it part of the agenda.
Okay.
We adopt these.
And I would like to get on a model of an agenda that if we are addressing one of these goals, we put, you know, goal A, number 2, whatever is applicable to it so that we can see it on the agenda. So I agree, Naz. I think that we, you know, if we're able to have a bond discussion that somehow focuses around equity, you know, we would list that next to it just to ensure that we're keeping track of how we really are addressing these goals throughout the year.
I do think we have an issue with all the brackets, starting with A, up in A, all of them, A, B, C doesn't have any bracket, C and D don't have any brackets right now, but we have some brackets here. I think that might reflect earlier discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Are we just gonna leave the brackets in except for maybe this one where we've re-edited it?
The brackets were placed as we were going through the discussion, and I would eliminate brackets that there didn't seem to be consensus around. So these should reflect what you believed as consensus as a board, but you are right that they should be officially talked about and said, yeah, we're good with all these brackets being in.
So are we good with all the brackets except for maybe B3?
Well, do we need to come back and re-examine anything with brackets? Or are we gonna go with them?
Or one way we could do this is if there is an obvious one that needs to be talked about, we can make our motion that we adopt the goals with the brackets removed. I mean, just the brackets, without the brackets. I don't know what to say, but we delete the bracket themselves. Or accept the bracketed language is probably the way to put it.
There you go. I think you can get rid of the number 3 because you did reword it.
Okay. I can undo it for a while if anybody wants me to.
So when all these goals were made up, are we taking into consideration if we aren't in school this year that, you know, our goals could be, you know, one of our biggest goals is going to be the mental health and the family health, the kid health of all of our students, staff, parents, families. I mean, you know, to me, that's, this is a tough day for, you know, all of our kids. If we're just, I'm just, you know, I don't want to talk about the whole state. I'm just talking about Newberg. I mean, this is a really tough day for everybody. So our goals really ranged around that, or are we kind of just asking you guys, because we made all these up, but now we're probably not having school. So
I wouldn't say we're not having school. I think we are still going to have school, just different.
true. I mean, yeah, better way to say it. And as I just think it's not what people were hoping for. Obviously, Joe said that also, but it's going to be a tough go for a lot of people. Hybrid was going to be barely workable for some people. So our goals reflecting that now that we're in a whole different, hoping to be back.
Well, the B2 isn't complete because it doesn't refer to the comprehensive distance learning. So it might be that we need to make that one say the closely evaluate the different models of learning or different models of school that we use, all of them, because it's not just hybrid now.
I mean, how, I guess my
say
question was,
evaluate all learning models.
Yeah, all the learning models we use, yeah.
I think more than ever, the people in the community might be looking to us to, you know, really being there for them, you know, as a school board. I mean, we've never been through anything like this, you know, going into year number 2, and they haven't either. So, I mean, are we really, you know, we're not in normal school mode, so we can't be in normal school board mode.
Looking for editing tools. I don't think I have any other than just deletion.
And Dave, I think you bring up a really good point, and I can only speak obviously for myself on this. But you know, when we were crafting these goals, I certainly was thinking about online, because I know, you know, even if we were able to open in a hybrid model, I know there's quite a few parents who, if they have the privilege and ability, would be keeping their children home for safety reasons. So I think even when we do see ourselves, you know, going to a hybrid model or even returning to school in a more traditional fashion, I think there will still be people who choose to do online only, larger than there were prior to this. So I was certainly thinking about the online population, regardless of if it's all of our kids or not, right? When we were creating these goals. I don't know if that answers your question or concern or not, but just from my perspective.
No, I mean, yeah, it does a little bit. I think, you know, I just think, you know, with the people out there, obviously today was a tough news for a lot of families, right? So it's like, you know, as a school board, I mean, it's not going to be a year for Dr. Joe or any of his staff all the way through, you know, all of his staff. So it really isn't for us either. I mean, I guess as a board, are we kind of, I guess, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to say it in the right way, Brandy. Is are we really going to get out there and be there for the community? Like, we're talking about doing it for the bond measure, but are we going to do it for these families that are really struggling? And that to me is an equity thing. It's like, because some families will roll through this a little bit better than others. That's not a money thing. That's just they got their, you know, maybe a healthier family than other people as far as getting stuff done. But, you know, a lot of people are going to be, I think, looking to the school board and Dr. Joe and everything, you know, to try to, like when I just said that thing about the seniors, it's like, I just have talked to so many people and they're scared to death that their seniors aren't going to get any type of a normal school year. If that did happen for the whole school year by chance, I mean, holy smokes, we're going to have to like try to push things out there and working with Dr. Joe to try to do something for our kids.
I mean, nothing is normal, right, for anybody right now. And
yeah, but
like Brian said, we're taking it one day at a time.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, forward we go 6 months, you know, we blink and, you know, 6 months has gone by too. So
I'm wondering, Dave, if in addition to the two, we have these 4 things here, maybe another one where we would, you know, tend to the impact on families in some sense. I don't know how to put it, but that we make specific reference to the impact on families of our various models. Doggone it. Would that help?
I just hope in some way that people of this town would look at us and say, tough time, tough decisions, but we feel like they really care about us a lot. And I don't know how that looks, you guys. I mean, that would be a discussion we'd have to have at another meeting to
Can I suggest, because I'm just reading the bullet points under A, and I feel like we could title a little better to be a little more accurate as to what we're trying to do as a district. So I would suggest that we rename that one to improving equality of opportunity in our district.
I don't feel like that language gets at the real root. I think it's not strong enough.
What is the real root?
To become an anti-racist school board.
How about, can we say anti-racism? Sounds like you could read this to say we're picking out all the racists and we're against them. I think it would be clearer a little bit if it just said anti-racism.
So I've been reading my Kendi, and there are some things in here I'm coming to understand just how much we've changed the definition of racism. I want to read. I have some objections to this label because it feels like it's an ideology, and I don't feel like the board's job is to adopt a political ideology. So I just want to read this real quick.
Before you go there, I did let Brandy know ahead of time that I did have a hard stop at 10. It is 10:10. I would love to continue this discussion, but I have to get out. You can continue, or we can pick this up at the next board meeting. However you choose, I'm open to that.
I mean, we want as many board members as possible to obviously form the board goals. What is everybody feeling about this? We're also missing Bob, so we should take that into account. Do we want to put this on another agenda? Do we want to continue tonight?
I don't want to continue tonight. I can't understand what the problem is, or what Brian's trying to bring across, because I think I'm just overloaded, and I wish we could have a separate discussion about this. This seems to be a point of conflict that we need to work through.
Okay, Rebecca, would you want another meeting for this specifically, or would you feel comfortable with it being on another agenda?
I would be willing to have another meeting about this, but we had the goals sent out to us, and you know, I want it to be all the board goals, you know, that we do come to agreement with this. So I want to understand where Brian's coming from, but it's getting too deep.
Okay. Does anybody have any strong objections about having another meeting to finalize the goals?
So next board meeting, we would do that?
I think Rebecca was saying, well, I think one of the options out there is to have a separate meeting to address and finalize the board goals, different than a regular board meeting.
I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Okay.
I'm not
All
opposed.
right, well then,
I'm not opposed.
I don't want to keep you guys any longer, but
you know, I'm not opposed. There will be scheduling issues, but I'm not opposed. For me,
there's scheduling issues. There's also staff time.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to take into consideration.
But yeah, I'm not opposed.
I don't think we're in a huge rush to get the goals done, as far as, you know, ideally we start on our work around the goals, you know, sooner rather than later, but also as a board, we don't have a specific, you know, have to have them by this date. We are still end of July, so we do have another month before school starts. We could try to put them on another board meeting and see how it goes. I am worried about staff time, of course, personal board time.
Yeah, got it. I just know the next meeting we're going to be talking about the bond and about other things. So.
Is the board comfortable letting the chair and the vice chair and the superintendent work out a good plan for how to have more conversation on this?
Yes.
Trying to figure it out tonight.
I would prefer next board meeting, but you know, I get your guys' schedules too. So August is a busy month for everybody.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, we'll come back with the plan.
Okay.
All right, Inez needs to go. We just have really quick next couple of agendas are in the back of the packet. The 11th meeting, we'll be talking about board committees, discuss conduct provision.
I gotta stop sharing. There you go.
Screen reopen, or for school reopening, the bond, and then the formation of committees around equity and start times. So, okay, everybody.
I have one question. Did the board